All right, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Oh, I'm going to use my gavel. All right, so first item on the agenda is call to order in order to establish quorum. Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call, please.
Member Hancock?
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Dr. Kawaguchi? Dr. Kawaguchi? Okay, absent. Member Linden, here. Member Moridomi? Okay. Dr. Pruitt? Oh, okay. Dr. Ross?
Here.
Member Sims? Okay. Member Yu? Dr. Garcia?
Present. We're just now getting entered into the panelists, so some of us may have been missed.
Okay. Member Yu? Was that?
So I think Donald Yu is having problems. He says he can't unmute himself on WebEx.
This is the moderator. We just promoted Donald Yu.
Morning, everyone. This is Donald, present.
Okay. Dr. Garcia?
Present.
And Dr. Wong?
Present.
Hey everyone, it's Glenn Kawaguchi. I was not a panelist earlier.
Oh, okay.
So I think it just looks like we have Mr. Moridomi and Ms. Sims that are not here today.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. Quorum?
Yes, and Dr. Pruitt is having internet issues.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, there is quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go on to item number two. So before we get started, since we have so many new members, I just want to say that we can take items not on the agenda, but we cannot talk about them since they haven't been noticed. So Madam Moderator, if you could open up, or Mr. Moderator, if you could open up the comment box for public comment for items not on the agenda.
Absolutely. Would you like to take public comment from the room first?
Oh, okay, we can. There's no one here.
Understood.
So we'll just do it from the public that's online.
All right, we are now accepting public comment from WebEx. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a moment now to see if we have a request for public comment. We have a request for comment from James. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Me?
Welcome, James. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I talked to the board at the March meeting about our efforts in Ventura, Santa Barbara County to develop a mobile optometric office. And I would like to ask the board to put that on the agenda for the December board meeting so we can talk about it and get a update on the progress of the regulations.
If I may, this is Executive Officer Murphy. Would you be so kind, sir, as to email optometry@dca.ca.gov with your personal information so that we might make a connection with you? I do recall your presentation in March, and I apologize that we haven't been able to connect. We did not have contact info that I was able to follow up with. So if you'd be so kind as to send us an email with that information at optometry at send an email to optometry@dca.ca.gov. We can make that connection.
I will do that. Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank you.
meeting.
Next, we have a request from Bonnie. Bear with us just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello?
Welcome. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to know, will an immunization certified optometrist be required to complete any immunizations, optometric continuing education, every license renewal period?
If I could interrupt, Bonnie,
Yes.
do you have a speaker near your microphone? There's a lot of feedback coming.
Okay. Oh, I don't know what to do. Let me turn these on.
All right, the echo has stopped. Go ahead, please. A little bit, yes.
Okay, will an immunization certified optometrist be required to complete any immunization-specific optometry continuing education every license renewal period? Was that better?
I'm so sorry, Bonnie. We were not able to hear your comments. We could hear sound, but not individual words.
Can I email it to you, Shara?
Of course you can. Thank you, Ms. Salvatore. I imagine you are making comments regarding CE for our immunization certification?
Yes.
Excellent. Yes, please. If you will email, actually, if you'll email optometry@dca.ca.gov, we will make sure that your comments are provided to the board in the next board materials.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And those are all of our requests for comment at the moment. Do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Okay, so moving on to item number 3, Department of Consumer Affairs update. Do we want to do executive office first, or should we do budget office first? Budget's with us. One person there. Yeah, she's in a dark jacket. And
Monica's with
us, sorry.
I believe our presenters may be available through the WebEx.
Correct. I'm here, Gregory Pruden, and I'm prepared to deliver the DCA update, which is item 3A, if you would like me to proceed.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Gregory.
Yes. All right. Well, as I just mentioned, my name is Gregory Pruden. I'm a legislative manager with the Division of Legislative Affairs within the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to provide the Department of Consumer Affairs update today. Open Meeting Act legislation. The governor signed Senate Bill 189 on June 30th, 2022, which reinstitutes through July 1st of next year the remote meeting provisions of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act that were in place during the pandemic. The changes took effect immediately upon signing. Please be aware that DCA wants you to have the right meeting for the business of the board or bureau while still taking into consideration both costs and public participation. We are asking boards to still track the costs for meetings, even those where there isn't travel, and also use WebEx as much as possible to allow the public to attend remotely, especially as COVID-19 numbers continue to rise. DCA is also still asking boards to complete the public meetings survey to assist in tracking these costs for your board meetings in order to be able to compare costs for in-person and WebEx meetings, since this legislative update change is only in place for this fiscal year. again until July 1st of 2023. We have distributed the surveys to all boards and bureaus and ask that they be completed within 30 days after each meeting held. Should you have any questions, please reach out to the department. In-person meetings, guidelines, and COVID-19 safety measures. Though legislation has passed allowing remote meetings, we are reminding boards that choose to hold in-person meetings of the safety measures, best practices, and recommendations for holding public meetings. When planning for upcoming meetings, please remember, all board members and staff are expected to follow the state and local public health guidelines that apply in the area where meetings are held. Face coverings are strongly recommended for all board members and staff at meetings. The California Department of Public Health strongly recommends that individuals continue to mask in indoor settings. Please post face covering guidance signage at your meeting check-in or entrance. Vaccination and testing. Prior to meeting in person or at a remote location, members need to submit vaccination verification to DCA's Office of Human Resources or be subject to COVID-19 testing. Regulations brown bag. DCA also recently held a brown bag meeting with executive officers and bureau chiefs on July 5th, 2022 to roll out changes to DCA's regulation development and approval process. These changes were also discussed and approved by DCA's Executive Officer and Bureau Chief Cabinet. DCA shared documentation on the process and changes with all boards and bureaus. Social media brown bag. On August 10th, the department held a brown bag meeting on the topic of social media. The presentation included an overview of social media best practices, content examples, security, and more. A copy of the presentation was provided to participants. If you have any questions or requests related to social media, please contact DCA's Deputy Director of Communications, Monica Vargas. DCA Workforce and Succession Plan. The department takes a proactive and strategic approach to the recruitment and training of its skilled and diverse workforce. To achieve this, DCA is updating its annual Workforce and Succession Plan. As part of this process, the department recently requested that board and bureau leaders complete a workforce survey. Responses will be used with other information about the department's workforce to inform decisions that align and support DCA's new strategic plan. Additionally, this process facilitates meeting CalHR's requirement that all state organizations with civil service employees maintain current workforce and succession plans. New DCA staff. DCA is pleased to announce that Nicole Lay was hired on June 24th of this year as the Deputy Director of DCA's Office of Administrative Services. With more than 20 years of state service experience, Nicole has dedicated 10 of those years to DCA. Most recently, she served as Acting Deputy Director of the Office of Administrative Services, where she was responsible for overseeing the business functions of the Human Resources, Fiscal Operations, and Business Services offices. Prior to this role, Nicole was Chief of the DCA Office of Human Resources. She also previously served at the Contractor State License Board and the Department of Motor Vehicles. We are very excited to have her as part of DCA's executive leadership team. Additionally, Olivia Trejo has been appointed as DCA's Chief of the Office of Human Resources as of August 1st. Olivia has over 22 years of human resources experience in state government, and the last 9 years have been with the department's Office of Human Resources. She began her career in 2000 at the Department of Insurance, moved over to the Department of Real Estate, and most recently served as the DCA Assistant Human Resources Chief for nearly 5 years. Lastly, Taylor Schick was appointed DCA's Chief Fiscal Officer in July. Taylor has more than 16 years of state service experience, all with the department. Taylor began his career in 2006 as a budget analyst and most recently served as the DCA Budget Officer. As the department's new Chief Fiscal Officer, Taylor will lead the dedicated accounting and budget teams. Final 2022 Board Member Orientation Training. Lastly, board members are required to complete BMOT, Board Member Orientation Training, within 1 year of appointment and reappointment. The final training of this year will be offered on October 12th, 2022. Members can register through the department's learning management system. This training is required for all newly appointed and reappointed members, but is also available as a refresher for all members and executive officers. Please reach out to Board and Bureau Relations with any questions. As always, the department is here to help, and if there is anything we can do to assist, please reach out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from board members? All right, so there doesn't seem to be any questions from board members. Let's go on to item number 3B, the budget office update.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure that they can hear me. And I've got my camera on. Not sure if you guys can see that or not.
We can.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Veronica Hernandez, and I am the budget analyst with the DCA Budget Office. I want to thank the board and the executive staff for allowing me a few minutes to present the board's expenditure projections and the fund condition statement, as well as answer any questions that you may have. Now I'd like to please have you refer to pages 4 and 5 of agenda item 3B. These are the documents that I'll be discussing today. They provide a lot of information on the board's budget, both expenditures and revenue, and the projected fund balance into future years. I would like to highlight some of the information and provide just a little bit more clarity on them. First, if we can go to page 5 of agenda item, please. All right, this is the board's expenditure projections, which are based on actuals and projected expenses as of fiscal month 12 or through June 2022. This document provides the board with detailed expenditures year to date, as well as projections through the remaining fiscal year. While reviewing this report, the top half of the document is the board's personnel service expenses, followed by the board's operating expenses. As we move to the end of the document, you'll see in the first blue column, the board had a beginning budget of approximately $2.9 million, which includes $93,000 in reimbursement authority. Year to date, the board has expended approximately $2.2 million and is projected to spend approximately $2.3 million, leaving a reserve balance of $605,000 or about 20.84%. This is considered a very healthy reserve. Therefore, the budget office has no concerns at the time. The board's fund condition statement can be found on page 4. So let's move to page 4 now of the materials. As a reminder, we read this document from top to bottom and then left to right. I'll go over a little further in detail with the document is clarifying that. The left column is the board's prior year actuals. It shows the board began 2020-2021 with an adjusted beginning balance of close to $2.1 million, collected approximately $1.8 million in revenue, and expended approximately $1.7 million in direct expenditures, plus an additional $143,000 in direct draws from the fund to support statewide expenses, such as supplemental pension payments, statewide pro rata, for a total expense of just under $1.9 million. The board ended 2020-21 with a little over $2 million reserve balance, or about 10 months in reserve. The balance, this balance moves to the top of the next column of the fund condition and begins the beginning balance for the next fiscal year. Once in reserve is the amount of time the board can continue normal operations without any incoming revenues. For 2021-22, based on the fiscal month 12 data, I was projecting the board to receive an estimate of $2.559 million in revenue, which is approximately 183,000 less than we projected in the governor's budget. The board's expenditures for this fiscal year as of fiscal month 12 are projected to be approximately 2.3 million, with an additional 177,000 in direct draws to the fund for a total projected expenditure of 2.6 million. As with revenue, expenditure projections may change with actual returns for expenses in the remaining fiscal months. The board is projected to end the current year with 2.1 million or 6.3 months in reserve. For budget year and ongoing, revenue is projected to remain stable, estimated approximately 3 million in revenue. The board fund remains stable at this time, showing a fund balance of 4.3 months in reserve by the end of 2023-24. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's revenue and expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projections as future fiscal months close. A few things to note of the board's fund condition. The fund condition is a snapshot in time and thus only a reflection of the data used in its creation. This fund condition was prepared on August 17th, 2022. One of the main factors driving expenditure increases in future years is a result of personal services adjustment. These include general salary increases, as well as employee compensation and retirement rate adjustments. The budget office includes an ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statement to account for these ongoing incremental adjustments. The fund condition does not include increased enforcement expenditures, which could create additional cost pressures to the board's fund in out years. Funds will traditionally show a decrease in months in reserve due to the conservative projection method displayed in the fund condition. Expenditures are projected with an outgoing 3% increase and revenue remains the same. And lastly, we would like to note to the board that any future legislation or unanticipated events could result in the board's need for additional resources, which would increase pressure on the fund. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's fund condition statement and keep the line of communication with the board's executive staff open for any future needs or expectations. Again, I would like to thank the board members and executive staff for inviting me to today's meeting, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do board members have any questions regarding the budget? Because when I go to click on it, it says it's locked on this screen. So if no one has any questions, can I ask IT?
Yep, if there's no questions for me regarding the board, or excuse me, the projections, I would like to turn it over to Matt now. He will be discussing the board's budget a little bit further.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Veronica, for that nice presentation. My name is Matt Nishamini. I'm also in the budget office. I'm also in the DCA regulations unit. I provide all the economic and fiscal analysis support for the regulations, as well as any statutory fee increases and special projects. I'm here today to talk about you board members, your roles, your fiduciary responsibilities, the responsibilities of board management and staff, and then the support that the regulations unit and the DCA budget office can provide you. If we could scroll up to that first attachment in agenda item 3B, please. It's page 1, please. So, notwithstanding any policy discussions that this board has entertained over the past year or is planning to take in the near future, I believe this following presentation will be one of the most important discussions put before this board. And to prep for this discussion, I've been actively following the board meetings and monitoring the board's budget for the past year. I'm here, my role is to help assist the board navigate these next few years to stabilize the board's funding and spending and to help ensure ongoing operations. I will explain processes, procedures, and provide guidance, as well as analyze projected outcomes of your actions. So let's begin with this memo. So this memo is actually addressed to the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psych Techs. It was drafted by one of DCA's senior attorneys last year. However, the message of the contents remains the same. So let's just look at this memo. The introduction. The purpose of this agenda item is to inform the board members about their fiduciary responsibilities and duties under current law for the fiscal management and administration of the board's fund. The discussion will focus on the duties imposed on all board members and the board's EO and the potential liability associated with non-compliance under current law. So the board is authorized pursuant to the Budget Act, and this is a dated Budget Act. It's now been updated for the 2022 year. And it says that you are allocated a budget appropriation for a specific purpose, and you have basically a year to spend those funds. Through the board members, through their executive officer are responsible for ensuring the board remains solvent, that the fund remains solvent, and that you do not attempt to incur expenditures in excess of the board's legally authorized budgetary appropriation. If we scroll to page 2, I want to highlight some of the government code. So Government Code section 13320 at the top there, it says that the board shall provide a complete and detailed budget to the Department of Finance every year. And we're just beginning that process now. Government Code section 13324 provides that every person who incurs any expenditures in excess of the allotments of their provisions of the fiscal year budget as approved by the Department of Finance or as subsequently changed by the Department of Finance is liable both personally and on your official bond for the amount of the excess expenditures. So if you sign a Form 700, this applies to you. And then lastly, the Budget Act itself, specifically Section 32, states the officers of the various departments and boards are expressly forbidden to make any expenditures in excess of these appropriations. And any member of a board who shall vote for any expenditure or create any indebtedness against the state in excess of the respective appropriations made by this act shall be liable, both personally and on your official bond. So that's pretty sobering. It's such a high bar for you board members. So we certainly applaud your service and appreciate your service. And we know that you're taking your responsibilities seriously. So if we use this memo, this base as a baseline understanding, we'll move on and we'll discuss more. I want to go into the fund condition statement and show you my observations of it, because you guys have an enormous responsibility ahead of you. Now, some of you may be asking, why is he going over this right now? We've never had a problem. We've never had fiscal concerns in the past. We've always had lots of money. We're getting this $1 million from the RDO fund, and that's all true. It's true for the past, but that's no longer the case. And this board and you board members are going to have to make some very tough decisions beginning today and moving into the future years. And my job is to help you and the board provide guidance so that you board members can make your decisions. So if we could look at that fund condition statement again on page 4, I'm going to go through that and show you some of my observations. So if we start in the middle column, and I want to start in the middle column. So this is the 22-23 fiscal year. And we're going to compare it to the 21-22 column, the one just right to the left of it. So if we go down into the revenue sections, we're projecting revenues of $2.441 million, and that's primarily in renewal fees. And we're also projecting 571,000. This is initial license and permits for a total of $3,090,000. However, as Ms. Hernandez just noted in the prior year, the column to the left, we only brought in 2,559, and we were projecting 2,700, a little over 2,700. So we came in about $200,000 short of our projection that the board provided to the budget office about a year ago. And if we look more closely at that renewal line, we'll see that last year we brought in $2,065,000, and this year we're saying we're going to bring in 2.441. So that's an increase of about $400,000. And then we're also noting that there's 20,000 right below that, and we brought in 114. So really those next two lines, the 20 and the 571, we should probably combine those. And that is a accounting component that's causing those to be split out. But really we're going to take those together. So that 20 plus the 571 is 591. And then likewise in the prior year, it's 114 plus 340. We're going to lump all those together. They're all basically initial license fees. And so the question is, why did the board overestimate in the 21-22 year? Well, we overestimated by nearly 200,000, and that was primarily due to RDO licenses being overstated by approximately 135,000 that did not materialize. And then the remaining of that is due to the mobile clinics revenue that has not yet begun yet. So as we continue to move down this fund condition statement in that middle column again, we can see that on that line 1111, we have a 3859. So that's $3,859,000 in budgeted expenditures. And if we look at the prior year, it's significantly more. It is growth of about 68%, or nearly $1.4 million. So what is causing that increase? Well, it's actually $1.563 million, excuse me. So that 68% in growth was caused by 5 budget change proposals that this board has been approved for. There were 2 in the 21-22 budget year, and there were 3 more in this current year, the 22-23 fiscal year. And now the board is significantly structurally imbalanced because you're only bringing in around $2.6 million, maybe $3 million, but we're going to discuss that further. That means that the board, just as this display is showing, the board is now structurally imbalanced by approximately $964,000, nearly $1 million per year. And this is growing as structural imbalances accelerate over time, and they grow over time unless this board takes action. Again, per this fund condition statement, unless the board takes corrective action, this structural imbalance will result in this board becoming insolvent, currently scheduled in the 25-26 fiscal year, assuming the board spends its full appropriation and assuming there are no other costs are incurred, such as increased enforcement-related costs, attorney general costs, new chaptered legislation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that also in a bit. So now I'm sure I have everyone's attention now, but I'd like to go back up above to the 22-23 column. And I want to talk about some observations that I'm seeing. And I sort of talked about it briefly. And I want to focus in on that 2.441 million. So that's an increase of $400,000, which we know is in part made up of the RDO fees, which did not materialize last year. And it's also made up in part from the mobile clinics. And that revenue has yet to materialize. And then also, so if we use that 2.559 as more of a baseline instead of the 3 million, well, now we're $500,000 less in revenue, which if we carry that all the way to the bottom, makes our reserve balance 500,000 less. So instead of 2.3, we are at $18 million. And then assuming that occurs again next year, instead of having 1,328 as an ending fund balance next year, we are going to be closer to $300,000. So I'm here today to inform you and to enlighten you and hopefully serve as a call to action and provide you guys with options that you can move forward with. And I would assume that right now, I'm going to assume that that additional revenue may or may not materialize. And so I'm going to go with a worst case scenario and that it doesn't materialize and then that you are fully expending. So what are your options here? So fortunately, as you may or may not know, let me tell you, so your fees are set in statute. They're all set in statute. And then they're established in statute rather, and then they are set regulatorily. So currently, not all of your fees are at the statutory cap. So you can actually increase your fees through the regulatory process. And if you were to do that, you're going to generate about $500,000 to $600,000 per year by raising them all to the statutory caps. And we'll talk about the regulatory process just in another minute. But even if we do that, that's only $500,000 or $600,000. And so that's not going to eliminate the entire structural balance, which is somewhere between $1 million and 1.5, depending on whether or not those additional revenues materialize. Which means you're going to need a statutory increase as well, because the regulatory increase will only partially offset that structural imbalance. So you can do it through regs. You will likely need step 2, a statutory increase in the future. And then you board members could opt to cut costs too, to take cost-saving measures. Now, it appears that that is unlikely since you've been ramping up your cost, that you've increased your cost by nearly 70% in the last 2 years with your 5 budget change proposals. You have one that is an enforcement-related BCP. That one cost $366,000 and you were granted 2 positions. There's the SB 509, that was a limited term and a half a position for $84,000. There was your AB 1534, where you had 3 more positions and $443,000. That's just in this year. And then last year, you had nearly $300,000 worth of budget change proposals, one for your study to your exam, and then for your mobile clinics, which is a 3-year limited term proposal. So all of these seems like thoughtful policy and operational decisions. So in the event you are not opting to cut your costs or some combination of cost-saving measures and fee increases, really, what are your options? Assuming that the revenues are flat at the prior year's model, closer to 2.6 and not 3 million. This board will become insolvent not in 25-26, but in early 24-25, and possibly as early as next fiscal year, the 23-24 fiscal year. So within about 24 months, under a worst case scenario, this board could be becoming insolvent. So the most expedient way to increase your funds would be through the regulatory process, where you can generate another $500,000 or $600,000. And this would at least delay insolvency. And I would note that the regulatory process typically takes 18 to 24 months, which puts the board in that window of potential insolvency. Plus, it's my understanding that the board has not yet filled its regulatory analyst position, and that's going to contribute to the delay. Fee regulations are a multi-step process. Step 1 is you board members must take some action to instruct the board's EO and board staff to initiate the regulatory process. And you must maintain constant and consistent monitoring of this process. It's not a vote on it and then we'll see you in 6 months. You must constantly be monitoring it. Step 2, the board staff, with the assistance of the regulatory unit, the regulatory attorney, and myself, will help to prepare the documents. And the first document is board staff will need to complete an internal desk fee study to estimate and justify any new fee levels. And this study is a statutory requirement to set the fees that OAL requires. And this is a 2 to 4 month project. And it's likely that the board has not ever done one of these. And so I would encourage you to get going as soon as possible, because it's probably going to take longer. These things just don't fall out of trees. And then once that analysis is completed, and my office will assist with that analysis, then the board staff will work with legal on regulatory text to adjust the fee levels, and then they'll come to this board and present it for full board consideration and approval, possibly at your December meeting. And so that's another 3 months away. And our 24-month clock is ticking. And you may also need stakeholder meetings, stakeholder outreach, public outreach, to inform your licensees of what's going on, and that you are going to have to do a regulatory increase as step 1, and then step 2, you will seek legislation in the future. So it's going to be a 2-step process. Next, upon board approval, the package and the supporting documents are completed in coordination with the DCA regulatory unit. And this is going to take another 2 to 4 to 6 months. And then once it's completed and approved by the DCA, it goes to agency. And agency has 30 working days. So that's working days. So that's 6 weeks. And then it goes out for public comment, public notice. And then based upon that comment, you may have to revise the regulatory text. And you have to respond to that public comment. And then after that process is finished, then you need to finalize the documents. And it goes back into DCA for a review, back to agency for review, and then off to the Department of Finance and Office of Administrative Hearings for review. And then concurrently, the board will have to coordinate the IT configuration of these new fee levels with the Office of Administrative Services. They're going to have to test the new fee levels to make sure that they're being adjusted appropriately and work with accounting. So this is a multi-step, multifaceted process to get your fee regulations in place. And, you know, it could very well take up to 2 years. At the same time, I would suggest that the board could engage with a statutory increase as well, concurrently. And the board may need to seek an outside third-party fee consultant to complete the study, or they perhaps could do it internally as well. It depends on the level of stakeholder feedback and how much feedback they're going to get from the lobbyists and from the legislature. And in the event there is a high amount of feedback coming from your professional associations, then a third-party study is the wisest way to go about it. That takes, you know, a 4 to 6, 8-month process. By the time you put it out for contract, you find an acceptable contractor, and then they complete the study. And that also involves a high level of engagement between board staff and the consultant. They're not going to just be able to write a check, and these things are probably $50,000 to $80,000 per contract, but board staff is going to have to be really involved on a weekly basis with that contractor to ensure its success. Now, some other considerations, and Ms. Hernandez touched on him. There could be other costs coming down the pipe. Legislation. Let's start with legislation. And I know that there is some legislation out there now that may or may not require additional staffing. And I believe that this board will be talking about one of those bills later on the agenda. And I know through internal discussions that preliminary estimates are, 3 to 5 positions, additional staff that could be required, analytical staff. So that's somewhere in the $600,000 to $1 million range. And then in the event the board is successful at attaining, say, another 3 to 5 AGPAs, analyst positions, the board is going to have a organizational. You're going to have organizational problems because you're not going to have enough managers. So you're probably going to need another manager one. So now your costs are going to be at least $1 million, probably closer to $1.2 million, in addition to your baseline of $3.88 million. So now you're up at $5 million. So that's just something to consider. Also, enforcement-related costs I could see spiking in the near future. And why do I say that? Because you have a BCP that you just were allocated for, approved for, which provided you 2 additional positions for enforcement. So what are these staff going to do? They're going to respond to more complaints. And your Division of Investigation costs could spike, and your Attorney General costs could spike, as your Office of Administrative Hearings as well. So I really think it's now as there's an inflection point that you board members are going to be going through right now and into the near future. And you're going to have to decide what actions you're going to take moving forward. So with that, I can take any questions.
Board members, does anyone have any questions?
This is Dr. Garcia.
Please go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Nishimini, thank you first of all for the excellent budget presentations. Since I've been on the board, this is the first detailed presentation like this. So I think it's really timely. A real basic question. I know you work with other boards as well. Is this a similar situation faced by other boards, or is this unique?
So it's not unique. All of the boards have been seeing cost increases. And this board is unique in that you've had 5 BCPs, and this board opted to make operational decisions to increase your budget by nearly 70%. And most other programs are not doing that. So you guys are experiencing growing pains, unlike other boards. However, license fee increases seem to be more regular now. Programs are getting on a schedule to evaluate their fees and being proactive and staying in front of it rather than reacting to it. I would say for our situation here, we are beginning to react to it, right? Because now we're on a clock, we're on a 24-month clock. And so now we have to take action to right-size this and to remain solvent. So I hope that answers your question, Dr. Garcia.
Yeah, that's an excellent response. So another question regarding fees. I realize the urgency to evaluate statutorily and regulatory to increase our fees. Now, if that were done annually or periodically, I'm sure that would help us prevent ourselves from falling into this position down the road. In terms of the caps, do those caps change annually based on the cost of living or some other formula, or is it capped by some other method?
Right, very good questions. So the first question is fee studies. So I don't think, so a formal third-party fee study is only required if you are seeking statutory changes. And so for example, your application fee for registration for an exam is $275. That is the cap. And I believe that it is set, it's also set at $275. So let me give you a different example. It's a different example. I believe you're...
Are there any other questions?
Oh,
Can you
hi,
hear
this
me?
is this is Board Member Linden. I'm sorry, do you mind, you explained earlier the 5 BCPs. Do you mind going over those positions again? And
Okay, I was still responding to Dr. Garcia's second
Oh, sorry.
question. So no, that's okay. Yeah, so so you do not need to have a fee study, a formal third-party fee study done every year. However, it's probably a good idea to build it into your strategic plan for every, say, 3 to 5 years to make sure that you're right-sized. The cap is the cap. So it'll say something like the fee can be no greater than $275. And then the regulations will come in underneath that and set that. So the regulations for that $275,000 or $275 cap, the regulations could set it at any level up to that, $100, $150, $200. So that's where the fee is set by the regulation. So you don't need to have it every year. As far as the caps are one way to go. Other programs have ranges, so they have a minimum range. So for your exam fee, you could set the minimum at $275 and then the maximum at $500. So then upon enactment of that bill, the 274, the floor minimum is established by law, and you do not need regulations. You can follow up with regulations, but the law will carry that $275, that minimum, and then you could raise it up to that cap because there is no cost of living provisions. It's a hard cap. I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you very much. Great info. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm sorry, could you repeat the second question?
This is Board Member Linden. If you could just go over what the BCP positions were again. And I'm also curious, basically I'm wondering how many of those were related to taking over the RDO fund. And just to clarify, at the last meeting and today's meeting, it says that at the end of budget year 23-24, you know, it looks like there's going to be, you know, over $1 million fund balance. But now you're saying that we might possibly be insolvent by the next budget year?
So what I'm saying is, right, so if you look at that fund condition statement and you've got 4.43 is what you're saying, right? $1.328 million is what you're saying? You're identifying? Okay,
Yeah.
so then if we go up, and rather than 3,090,000 and 3,085,000, if you only bring in 2.5 million there in both those years, that's $1 million less, right? 500,000 and 500,000, $1 million less. And so then if we scroll down, that 1.328 million is not going to be, it would be 3 million, or it'd be 300,000. So I'm not saying that you're going to go, what I'm saying is that you could go as early as that. So for example, if later this year, if in February or March, if this board is sending a high number of cases to the Attorney General and you need an increased augmentation, say of $400,000 to adjudicate cases that are being sent to the AG and to the OAH, then that wipes out that $328,000. Also, if there's future legislation or there's pending legislation that is before the legislature now that is going to increase cost pressures in the 23-24 year, well, then there you go. Another BCP, say you need another 4 positions and it's $1 million, and that BCP would begin in 23-24, you're not going to have any reserves. It would wipe it out, assuming those revenues don't materialize, right? Assuming they don't. And I'm just saying it's going to be, looking at this, it's very optimistic to think that that 3,090,000 is going to come in this year, based upon we have 1 year of real actual data that shows only 2.559 came in. So unless something has happened between now and last year that I'm unaware of, I don't see another $500,000 coming in. So we're going to be working with the board, the EO and management to really dig into this in the next coming months as we build the next governor's budget. But realistically, that 3 million could be revised downward. Now, as far as the BCPs, yes, so you've had 5 BCPs and they are all public. They come out with the governor's budget and they are on the Department of Finance's website. But rather than point you there, I would encourage you to reach out to board staff and they can provide you with copies or links to those. But I can give you a high overview of it. There was an enforcement. Is that the one you wanted to know about, the enforcement related one?
I was just curious, the ones, if there were any related to the takeover of the RDO.
I don't believe specifically. Ms. Murphy, can you help me with that? I don't believe so.
No, much of the BCPs were to address our backlog within enforcement cases. We have cases that have sat for 2 to 3 years that have not been worked. So we were lucky enough to bring in a unit manager in order to help staff work their caseload appropriately. Then we also brought in additional licensing help, and then of course many of them were to support the mobile optometric, service delivery, and then also the increase of certifications that have been enacted through legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nishimini, this is Dr. Garcia. I have another question.
Yes.
So under revenues, where would we find fines. For example, if something does go to the Attorney General and the the licensee is found negligent or whatever, and there's a fine or fee, I know we collect those, and that is to help cover our expenses for the investigation process. Where would we find that on here?
Right, so it's going to be in those other regulatory fees and permits. It's going to be rolled into that. And we can get you, get your board staff a more detailed roll-up of what is included in that. But let me just say this, that we don't like to budget based upon citations and fines. And why is that? Because you're dealing with somebody who is being disciplined by the board and may or may not have a job or a license or, you know, conditional approval. And so it's just very difficult. Or they might just leave. They might just say, you know what, I'm moving to Alaska. And so it's really hard to budget off of that. Last year, it looks like you brought in about, let's see here, get that number to you, but it's not a lot. It's just really hard to budget behind those folks. Your main revenue stream is going to be from your renewal base. Cite and fine, let's see here. Cite and fine, you brought in $12,300 last year is our projected year-end closing. We haven't closed the books on last year, but that's a pre-closing estimate. It's not a lot. And then citations for RDOs was another $2,500. So $1,800 bucks.
This is Dr. Garcia. A follow-up question. Just having, being in business, I can kind of relate to this a little bit, but do boards use agencies to try to collect fines, fees, amounts owed, or is that not allowed? Debt collectors?
Yeah, not to my knowledge. I'm not sure. Not to my knowledge.
Dr. Garcia, so we are able to work with the Franchise Tax Board in order to collect fees. That, of course, does not apply to businesses. We are in the process of reviewing opportunities to work with debt collectors, but have not had the staff bandwidth to find an appropriate number of resources and then go out to bid for a contract on that. But we are looking at ways in which we can collect from businesses, particularly. I think your line of questioning, you're looking for the citation and fees that were levied against Stanton Optical. Of course, those were decreased through the administrative law judge decision and came to about $65,000. We have received some of those fees, but I know that not all of that abatement is complete. So one, there has not been a payment of all of the fees, nor has there been a good faith registration of those businesses. So we are looking at ways in which we might be able to have a little more teeth or a few more tools in our belt in order to get those fees that have been levied against and supported by the ALJ.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Thank you, Ms. Murphy. That's a great explanation. I can sense that there's a very large gap between fines and what was collected even during my short tenure here. So that definitely is worth investigating more. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Look forward to keeping this conversation going.
Thank you for the wonderful report. Right, so then I think we will be going on to item number 4, which is the board's president's report, which is mine. Public comment. Oh, could we, Mr. Moderator, if we could open up the queue for public comment.
Absolutely. We are now taking public comment on agenda item 3. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So now we're going to go on to item number 4, which is the board's president's report. I forgot earlier to welcome both of our 2 new board members, Dr. Ross and Ms. Hancock. So I wanted to take just a moment right now to let them introduce themselves to the public. Since Mr. Ross is right here next to me, I will ask him to say something first.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Dr. Jonathan Ross. I practice at the UC Davis Eye Center here in Sacramento, so I'm a local, so it wasn't a far commute for me this morning. First off, I just wanted to express my sincere thanks to the governor for giving me this opportunity to join colleagues and professionals here on the state board. I truly view this appointment as a real privilege. I have kind of grown up with a deep sense of wanting to give back to my community through public service, so I've really been looking forward to this opportunity. So again, thanks everybody for allowing me to be here today. Thank you.
Well, welcome, Ms. Dr. Ross. And if Ms. Hancock wants to say something, I think
Yes, hi. Thank you. Thank you for your warm welcome. I as well am excited to be a part and see how the whole process works. My background is I've been dispensing as an optician for a little bit shy of 29 years. I'm ABO certified for 26 and my RDO license for a little under 14 years now. My background is in family optometry practice. I also spent about a decade running optical department for a single practice ophthalmologist. And I'm just a little over 13 years as an independent now, owning and operating my own optical in the rural foothills of the Sierra Nevadas.
Welcome, Ms. Hancock.
Thank
All
you
right,
very
so going
much.
on to the next part, in your documents, there's just a list of committees and work groups that our board members will be a part of. And I also, in the past, we have had outside or past board members part of some of our work groups, and I wanted to put it to a vote to the board again to appoint a few of our most recent past board members to some of our work groups. Right. So for the Optometry and Optician Practice Act work group, Drs. Kawaguchi and Dr. Turetsky were both members of it. Dr. Kawaguchi is supposed to still be on that work group, and I wanted to put it to a vote to the board to have Dr. Turetsky continue to be part of that work group. Can I get a motion?
Dr.
I'll
Garcia.
motion.
I think Dr. Garcia made the motion. Dr. Ross, do you want to second it?
I'll second.
And then I think I just need a vote for that. Oh, do I need public comment? Public comment? Can I get public comment first?
We are now accepting public comment on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, please. Ms. Linden, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
On the motion to have Dr. Kawaguchi and Dr. Tretzky on the practice work group.
Can you turn your mic on?
Oh.
No.
Okay, hello? Great, okay. Member Hancock?
Yes.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Member Linden? Aye. Member Moridomi is absent. Dr. Pruitt is absent. Dr. Ross?
Aye.
Member Sims is absent. Member Yu?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
I vote aye.
And Dr. Wong.
Aye.
That measure passes 7 votes.
All right, thank you. And then one more work group. Two more? All right, so there's two more. The second one would be Dr. Madhu Chawla has been sitting on our Practice and Education Committee as a past board member, and I would like to make a motion to have her sit on the Practice and Education Committee one more year. Could I get a motion? Oh, public comment. Motion first. Could I get a motion first? Motion, please.
You can make it.
Hold motion.
You can always make a motion.
And, well, I'll second it then. All right, could I get public comment, please?
We are now accepting public comment on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, please. Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call vote.
Member Hancock?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Member Linden? Aye. Member Moridomi? Absent. Dr. Pruitt? Absent. Dr. Ross?
Aye.
Member Sims is absent. Member Yu?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
I vote aye.
And Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Okay, measure passes.
Okay, and for the third and final work group, the NBEO ARBO work group, Sid Brandvine was on that committee, that work group with me, and I would like for her to continue to be on that work group to continue her expertise. I will make the motion if I could get a second.
I'll second.
Dr. Ross is going to second. If Mr. Moderator, if you could open up the queue for public comment.
We are now accepting public comment on the third motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes. Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call vote, please.
Member Hancock?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Member Linden? Aye. Member Moridomi? Absent. Dr. Pruitt? Absent. Dr. Ross?
Aye.
Member Sims? Absent. Member Yu?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, with the recent appointment of our registered optician, Ms. Stacy Hancock, to the board, I'd like to recommend appointing Board Member Hancock to the Dispensing Optician Committee. With this appointment, the DOC will be able to schedule a meeting immediately upon the governor's appointment of enough committee members to allow committee votes. Do we need to take a vote for that? Okay, I'd like to make that motion if someone wants to give me a second.
I'll second.
Dr. Ross is going to second. And Mr. Moderator, if you could open up the queue for public comment, please.
We are once again open for public comment on a new motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment in the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, please. Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call vote.
Okay, Member Hancock,
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Member Moridomi, absent. Dr. Pruitt, absent. Dr. Ross,
Aye.
Member Sims, absent. Member Yu,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Okay, measure passes.
Thank you. Let's go on to item number 5, discussion and possible approval of our meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments for the March 11th, 2022 board meeting minutes? No? Can I open up the queue for a comment?
I think then you should just go to May, and then if not, you can take them up again.
And now, does anyone have any comments for the May 20th, 2022 board meeting minutes? Public comment now? Could I have a motion to pass both the minutes for the March 11th and May 20th, 2022 board meeting minutes?
I'll move to adopt both meeting minutes.
I have a motion from Ms. Linden. Could I get a second?
I'll second.
And Dr. Ross is going to second. Mr. Moderator, if you could open up the queue for public comment.
We are now accepting public comment on the meeting minutes, March 11th and May 20th. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request on the meeting minutes, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, please. Ms. Linden, if we could have a roll call vote to pass minutes.
Madam President, this is Dr. Garcia, if I could intervene real quick. So as just a point of order, and with all due respect, Dr. Ross wasn't at the meeting, so he wouldn't necessarily be able to do a first or second. But I'd be happy to if that's what your request is.
Yes, please. Legal's going to address that.
Hi, I can't see. This is Sabina Knight, Legal Counsel for the department. Those members who are not present at the meeting, they're not necessarily certifying that this is exactly what happened. They are certifying this is a record of the meeting. So even though they were absent, they can still go ahead and vote on that.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
Sure.
So Ms. Linden, if we could have a roll call vote now, please.
Okay, Member Hancock,
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Member Moridomi, absent. Dr. Pruitt, absent. Dr. Ross,
Aye.
Member Sims, absent. Member Yu,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to take things a little bit out of order. Item number 6 is a presentation on DEIB by Dr. Shoge from UC Berkeley. She will be making that presentation at 1 o'clock today after lunch. So we are now going to go on to item number, and then we will be breaking for lunch at noon today. So we're going to go on to item number 7.
Mr. Moderator, if you could elevate to panelist Danny Rogers.
Absolutely. Bear with us just a moment, Danny. We're going to promote you to panelist. All right, welcome, Danny.
Board members, you'll recall this package concerning continuing education has been before you many times. We have refined it prior to the pandemic, refined it again post-pandemic. When it came to you previously for your board vote, there was unfortunately a technical error. In order to submit an accurate record to the Office of Administrative Law, we've been instructed to take a vote again. You will note that there is the inclusion of a strikeout that was did not appear before when you last reviewed this package. So the policy continues to be the same that we've hashed out over really the last 5 years, and then refined after the pandemic. We are just looking for your approval of this package that includes the strikeout that was omitted previously. Danny, if you have any other comments you'd like to give?
I do not. Good morning, board members. If you have any questions, please direct them to me and I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay. Are there any questions from board members? Can I get a motion to pass?
Yeah. The motion's in your memo, I believe.
Okay, so then
It's a very long, complicated memo that somebody should read into the record.
Does someone want to make a motion? Is it attachment A?
I'll make a motion.
We have to read it. Attachment B. So if you click on attachment B, you can read the motion, Dr. Ross.
It's actually the 7th.
Yeah, go back to the next one.
Okay. I move to approve the proposed regulatory text of Section 1536 and Form CE01, incorporated therein by reference, direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations at Section 1536 and Form CE01 as noticed.
Could I get a second for that motion?
I'll second. This is Member Linden.
Ms. Linden seconds. So, Mr. Moderator, if you could open up the queue for public comment, please.
We are now accepting public comment on the matter. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Member Hancock,
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Member Moridomi, absent. Dr. Pruitt, absent. Dr. Ross,
Aye.
Member Sims, absent. Member Yu,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Okay, and the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Linden. So we are now going to go a little out of order, and we are going on to item number 9, the Executive Officer's Report.
Thank you, President Wong. Of course, as many of you know, board members who have served and public who have served, we use this time in our report to let shine the subject matter experts within our staff. I'm very happy to introduce to all of you our new enforcement manager, Jolie Walker. And the presentation today on enforcement will be given by Terry Villarreal and Ms. Walker. If you'll just say a few words, Jolie, come on up and just introduce yourself a little bit. Let us know about your background. Jolie's a great hire, one that I'm excited to learn from, as well as the rest of our enforcement unit and staff.
Hi, I'm Jolie. Can you hear me? Okay. This is Jolie Walker. I previously worked at the medical board, and before that, under DCA at the Veterinary Medical Board. And I'm excited to be at the Optometry Board and learn everything I can.
All right, would you all like to begin the presentation of your annual statistics?
Hi. This is Terry Villarreal.
Terry, is your mic on?
I'm sorry? You can't. Oh. The green button is on. Okay. Is that better? YouTube, yeah. Is that better? Okay, I'll just talk loud. So the enforcement report for this board meeting. So this past year, the enforcement staff have continued to focus on closing older cases, which is aligned with the department's performance measures, targeted timelines. The hiring of additional staff in the enforcement unit has assisted with us with achieving this goal greatly. An enforcement bulletin also, a new enforcement bulletin was published about a week ago. This is our second enforcement bulletin. The featured article in this bulletin talks about the citation process and what is involved should a licensee be issued a citation. So I'm not sure if any of you have checked out this new enforcement news bulletin, but it has a lot of great information in it. Also, the same sections are included in the enforcement bulletin, such as Ask an Analyst. This is a particular question that comes up for us. We like to feature a question in each bulletin, and we publish answers in relation to this particular question. And we are getting a lot of positive feedback about the bulletin, so it's continued to be a hit with us. So for the past 2 board meetings, the past 6 months, I have reported that that the enforcement staff have been working on a new format that will that will show in greater depth a compilation of enforcement statistics in relation to the cases and how, how many cases we close and open, and how that compares to prior meetings. So that is included a little bit further down on this report. So we're excited to present this new format to you. We've been talking it up for a while, so now it's complete, and we're happy to show that to you. The two reports, there are two reports. One of the reports is for the optometry program, and the other is for the optician program. Since these programs are still separate, we created spreadsheets for both of these programs. So when we get to those reports, you'll see that they have target dates on them, and the target dates came from the performance measures that the department has set. So for example, there's a target date in relation to opening complaints, how soon they should be opened after they're received by us. So you'll see that. That's just an example of one of the target dates and what that means. And also, as Shara mentioned, the enforcement unit is very pleased to welcome the enforcement manager, Julie Walker. She only said a few words, but what she said doesn't begin to explain what an asset she is to the enforcement unit and what experience she has that she has brought with her, and she's a great hire, and I don't know that enforcement staff has made it clear to Shara how happy we are to have her. So great hire, Shara. So continuing on, you can see here the citations we've issued for this quarter. Same thing for the statement of issues and the pending accusations. So now, if you keep scrolling, you'll see the statistics report. The first one is for the optometry program. So this is broken out. So this is an annual review of the past 4 quarters. So it's a fiscal year report, year to date. So the top section talks about the volume of complaints for intake. The second section talks about the cycle time for intake, and you'll see where it says the target date is 7 days in section 2 under Pm3 Cycle Time intake. I also wanted to mention that this format was brought to us by Cricket Borges. She's been with the enforcement unit for only about a year, and this is a format that she brought from another board, and she helped us. She was a great help in implementing this and getting the statistics put in this report. So she worked really hard to get this put together. It took quite a while because it contains a lot of information. A lot of reports had to be ran because we have a lot of data that had to be included on this optometry report and then the optician report that's coming up. So I wanted to give her, I wanted to call her out and say, great job to her. She worked really hard. So continuing on this report, you'll see Pm3 Cycle Time. It explains what this section is. The cycle time, the target date for this particular section for investigation is 90 days. The numbers are a little higher than what we would like, but we are continuing to focus on closing our older cases, and we are confident that when you read this report through the quarters, you'll see that our numbers are going to go down consistently, and that'll look good for our unit.
If I just could interrupt you very quickly, Terry. I just want to make sure that everyone sees, though, that half of our cases are being closed within up to 90 days. So again, it is that historic backlog that we continue to work through that really is kind of pulling down our numbers. And so that's why our enforcement hires have been so very important. But I really want to give kudos to our current team for the work that they're doing with those complaints that come in. They are moving them out quickly, investigating them thoroughly, and moving them to the next process. And I think even though our numbers aren't within what we want, I really want to make sure that folks understand the hard work the enforcement unit is doing.
So continuing on, towards the bottom of the page, you'll see the citations, the report for citations, the final citations, and the average number of days to close them. So continuing to the next page, under Pm3 Cycle Time Discipline, the target date is listed. And the same for, so just continuing. So you'll see the AG cases initiated and that section of discipline. And the rest is discipline cases.
And just want to call attention is we've gone through the last several quarters of our enforcement staff doing enforcement trainings for all of us. You now see that here we've got the other legal actions, so those interim suspension orders and the PC-23 orders that we've talked about, you know, where there's an immediate need to intercede on practice from a professional or a licensee. Not something we often, and not, as you can see, not in the last year have used at all, but wanted to just point that out as we've gone through the trainings over the last year and really tried to give folks a deeper understanding of how we go through the process and what tools we have in order to enforce appropriately.
So if you could continue to scroll, you'll see the Optician reprogram case statistics. So this is the exact same format. This is only for the Optician program. So it talks about the number of complaints received for each quarter with a total year end at the far right. So the target date is 7 days, and so that is the next chart. So you can scroll through here and look at the information for the same sections as it was for the optometry program. So if you keep scrolling past the charts of the statistics, you'll see the latest quarter. The latest edition of the news bulletin for summer 2022. So this is the citation information I was talking about earlier. And we included a chart in this bulletin that kind of explains the process, the life cycle of a citation. It looks a little confusing, but if you just follow the lines, you'll see how citations are processed and closed.
And Terry, if I may, I really just want to give kudos to our enforcement staff in trying to close the backlog. They really have employed our citation authority more and are really addressing unlicensed practice, particularly within the opticianry space. And so we really just want to, again, you know, the enforcement team and then also our Consumer Protection Committee and working with us to build the quarterly enforcement bulletin. Just want to give a thanks to board members for supporting us in that. We are, again, getting good feedback on it as a training and that licensees are beginning to understand more how we go about the disciplinary process and are hopefully also, you know, feeling a little less scary about it. Complaints occur, and we do our best to take all sides and engage all information in order to do a fair investigation. The minute you get a letter concerning a complaint, it doesn't mean you're on the bad list. We really just want to work with you to make sure that we can uncover all the facts. So I want to say that the enforcement unit and the Consumer Protection Committee have done a great job in helping us to better communicate that to the licensee population.
We also like to include some frequently asked questions with each edition of the enforcement bulletin. Of course, we try to include new questions and answers. We ask our technicians who answer the phone is there a question that you are getting that more this quarter or more now than you know, have in the past. And, you know, our opticians confused, our optometrists confused about something. You know, when they, for example, if they're about to retire, how do they put their license in the retired status and what that means exactly. So we like to feature those questions with an answer here in this section. And we also like to include, did you know section, some not statistics, but just some facts about, you know, did you know that your license renews every 2 years or every, you know, just some basic information. That was just an example. And then if you keep scrolling, you'll see the recent administrative actions and disciplinary actions. So this information is the same information that we put on our website that you can find under the Enforcement tab. I know that some individuals have trouble finding this information on the board's website. There's a lot of information on our website. So this is kind of just a spotlight as to the disciplinary actions we've taken recently. And then, as I mentioned earlier, ask an analyst. This is a question that, again, if we are being asked this question in our public email, then we'd like to, you know, pull a particular question, you know, that's confusing to some, and then we'd like to provide the answer. And that's it. Any questions, anyone?
This is Dr. Garcia, no question, but I just wanted to echo what Ms. Murphy was saying and just commending our enforcement team for all the hard work. We've really come a long way, and this bulletin looks amazing, so thank you.
More kudos for our team. Sorry, I'm going to step in. I just want to make sure that everyone understands in this new format of the statistics report, this maps to what we are required to give the PM performance measures that are done DCA-wide, and then also what we give to the legislature within our sunset report. So you'll begin to see our data align more. It'll be easier for you to track what we bring to you in each quarterly meeting, and then, of course, the roll up to the year, and then that every 4 years, our sunset report, which really details all the work that we've been doing since our last authorization. So again, kudos to enforcement staff because this makes it all easier for us to understand and take a look at the progress that we're all making.
So I'd like to echo that too. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So thank you, Terry. Let's go on now to the licensing update, please. Examination and licensing programs.
Fantastic. And giving us this presentation is Randy Love, our Assistant Executive Officer.
Hello, good morning. So I started off the report with our statistics for the fiscal year of 2021 through 2022. I like to start the new fiscal year by providing an overview of the prior one. And the statistics are, as with the enforcement statistics, they are coming more into line with the type that we submit to Department of Consumer Affairs for their annual report and the ones that we submit for sunset review. And I've also included some prior year statistics as well, so you can kind of see the statistics, how they change from year to year as far as applications received, renewals processed, things of that nature. And then on the third page of the statistics is a snapshot as of June 30th, 2022, how many licensees we have in each license type based on their current status, whether they are current and active or delinquent or maybe have surrendered their license. That's every license we've ever issued and the current status that it's at, which is just interesting information, and it's part of what gets complicated when people ask how many licensees do we have. Well, we have 7,563 current active optometrists, but in total, we have over 14,000 optometrists who may be under our jurisdiction at some point in the future. So it gets a little complicated. After these statistics for the prior year, we've got some staff information. In the last fiscal year, we ended up losing 2 of our full-time licensing staff members, but we have hired 1 new licensing staff member, and we are working on recruiting 3 new positions that we got with the Budget Act of 2022-2023. Some of those were from the BCPs that we talked about earlier. And we're also going to be recruiting soon for our vacant positions, and we're hoping to start 2023 with a full licensing unit. And finally, for licensing and exams, the 2022 optometrist graduation application season, we rolled out a new sort of process for that, so that we could work on a proactive communication with our applicants, as well as being more transparent with what we've received and where they are in the process, and reducing the overall amount of time that it takes between when the license was issued and, or I'm sorry, when the application was submitted and their license is issued. We are currently on track to have everyone from the class of 2022 licensed by mid-September, and we are really excited about how that's been turning out. So I don't have anything else for the licensing and examination report, but I am available for any questions that you have.
Does anyone have any questions?
This is Dr. Garcia again, not a question, just to commend Randy and her team for getting us to this point. Mid-September is awesome. Great job, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Randy. Licensing is a complicated and long process. So kudos to your team. So I think at this point, we are going to break for lunch. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we get a public comment on licensing? Or Mr. Moderator, if you could open up the queue for public comment.
We are now accepting public comment on agenda item 9. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Okay, I think at this point, we are going to break for lunch, and we will reconvene at 1 p.m., and Dr. Shoge will be doing a presentation on DEIB. So thank you, everyone, and see you back at 1 p.m. Okay, welcome back, everybody. It is now 1:02 p.m. So, Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call. Do we need to do a roll call, right? Yeah.
Okay. Member Hancock?
Present.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Here.
Member Linden? Present. Member Moridomi? Absent. Dr. Pruitt? Absent. Dr. Ross?
Here.
Member Sims? Absent. Member Yu? Member Yu? Dr. Garcia?
Present.
And Dr. Wong?
Present.
Okay, we have 6, that's quorum.
So now we are going to move on to item number 6. Dr. Ruth Shoge from UC Berkeley is going to give a presentation.
I think we got it.
Aha.
All right, we can see that. Does it look familiar, Dr. Wang? Okay. Whew. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Ruth Shoge. I am Associate Clinical Professor at Berkeley School of Herbert Wertheim School of Optometry and Vision Science. And I'm also the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. And I've been on the campus for about 1 year now. And my presentation today is just on DEIB in optometry, what it is, what DEIB is, and why it's important, why we need it, and why we need to be involved. First, I want to start off with a land acknowledgement. So Sacramento is the ancestral land of the Nisenan people, the Maidu people to the north, the Valley and Plains Miwok people to the south of the American River, the Patwin Wintun peoples to the west of the Sacramento River, and the Wilton Rancheria peoples, the only federally recognized tribe in Sacramento County. We recognize these tribes as the indigenous stewards of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. With truth, transparency, and reconciliation, to be acknowledge the existence and the oppression and exclusion of these peoples, and we also recognize the actions that are necessary to rectify past wrongs. So before I jump into the professional who am I, which I think we do very easily as professional people, I like to start with that, you know, I'm a daughter first, and a sister, and now an auntie to 4. And so this is the most recent pre-COVID picture of my family. And since COVID, we've actually had 2 additional little ones, Audrey and McKenna Grace. And so, my family obviously is very important to me. And so I always like to start off with, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, and I'm a very, very proud auntie who loves to spoil her nieces and nephews. So professionally speaking, I am trained as an optometrist. I went to the Pennsylvania College of Optometry, and I did my residency there as well in pediatrics and binocular vision and vision therapy. And also a little bit later in my career there, started working with the traumatic brain injury population. I went back to do a master's in public health because during the time of being a clinician, and I was also a faculty member at PCO shortly after I completed my residency, I realized with working with different populations, particularly the TBI population, I noticed that we were missing something in terms of people accessing care. And so the clinic in Philadelphia was primarily Black. I would say easily it was a 90% Black population, whereas the TBI patients I was seeing, they were the inverse of that. And so clearly there was some kind of disconnect that I didn't understand. And so I thought maybe having a better understanding of public health, having a better understanding of the patient perspective of healthcare might help me with understanding how we can best close that gap. And so I went to Temple University to get my MPH, where I concentrated in social and behavioral science. That is kind of where things started to change rapidly after I graduated. I started a consulting company just to really have a means of educating the optometric profession, students, faculty, practicing optometrists in the communities on why understanding health disparities, cultural competency is important to our practice. And through that consultation, I worked with Berkeley, and then the dean offered me a job and I took it. So that's how I found myself here, and all of that transpired about a year ago. So the objective for today is to review some key definitions, look at some disparities in vision health and eye care, and how bias and bias awareness plays a role in our taking care of people. What we're doing at Berkeley in terms of DEIB work, and then finally a call to action that I have for this organization. Before we get started too deeply though, I want to start with a quick activity, and this is nice enough so people in person and people at home can participate. So first, I'm going to ask everybody to close their eyes and just take a deep breath. And I want you to imagine a situation. We're now out of COVID, and you've hopefully gotten back into maybe doing some travel. So you're on your way to perhaps your favorite destination, and all of a sudden you're running late, and you're trying to rush through the airport to get to your plane, which is about to close their doors. And you walk on just in time, and as they do that, they close the door behind you. As you walk down the aisle, the pilot welcomes you aboard, and you take a seat. You get to your destination, and you go to a restaurant and have one of the best meals of your life. Dreams are calorie-free, so really savor this meal. And so as you're enjoying your meal, you notice a couple off to your right side, and they're having a very loving conversation. Perhaps they're celebrating some kind of anniversary or something. You go back to your hotel, get a good night's sleep, and then you go the next morning to a tech conference featuring the latest gadgets and must-haves, and the keynote speaker walks up onto the stage to give everybody the information on what's to come for that company. So you should have a pretty clear picture of all of this in your mind, and now I want you to open your eyes. So as you maybe replay that in your mind, who was the pilot that you saw in your visualization? Who was the couple in the restaurant sitting off to your right? Who was the tech CEO who came to the stage to talk about the latest, greatest gadget that we all want? So this can be interactive, and I'd be happy to hear people's thoughts on who they thought these people or peoples were in their visualization. Any volunteers?
I have a friend whose husband is a pilot, and so I immediately saw Michael in my eye that he was piloting the plane.
So a friend's husband is a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And what does this friend's husband look like?
He's a thin, slight man, wears glasses, balding, though he would not want me to say that, and then shaves the rest of his head. Yes.
Okay, good. Anybody have any other thoughts on who they saw in their visualization?
For the tech CEO, I pictured Elon Musk being there.
So the point is, you know, we think about these visualizations, but the next step is, how did we arrive at these associations, right? So most of the times when I ask people to say, well, who do they visualize as a pilot? It's typically a white male that they see as a pilot. That's the most common response that I get to this. Who they saw as a couple, it's typically an older heterosexual couple, and who they saw as a tech CEO, it's usually Elon Musk. Usually people say Steve Jobs as their kind of visual reference. And so then how do we make these associations? Well, we make these associations because we draw on the experiences that we've had, either personally or experiences that are projected onto us all the time, right? So if we don't personally know a pilot, we draw on what we've seen. So I might think about the character that Tom Hanks played in that pilot movie. And so that's who I see as the pilot. And so how do we start to break some of these associations? And more importantly, what does this have to do with healthcare? Are my associations, my visualizations, going to impact the way that I take care of people? I think we can arrive at the short answer of yes, but we'll get into why that is. And so what these are, these associations, they're unconscious biases. And so these are formed involuntarily from our experiences I mentioned, and they're reinforced. And so unless we have experiences that break some of the stereotypical daily reinforcement we experience, it's really hard to kind of break out of that box. And so there's been plenty of cognitive neuroscience research on topics like this, and they have demonstrated that most decisions that we make, especially regarding people, are alarmingly contaminated by our biases, and obviously this has some effect when we are actually taking care of patients. So our assessments of others are never as objective as we believe or want them to be unless we are actively working to break some of those biased associations. So what is bias? Bias are attitudes or prejudices in favor of or against one thing, person, or group with when compared with another. It's typically a bias is considered something that's unfair. So sure, there can be positive biases, but oftentimes it's working against another person or another group of people. And so I mentioned the term unconscious bias before, and so we have our explicit or conscious biases, and then we have our implicit or unconscious biases. Now, explicit biases are those things that we can pretty much name if we're brave enough to do. Maybe we'll tell ourselves that, yeah, I have a bias against this, or maybe tell a trusted family member or friend. But these are attitudes and beliefs that we have about a person or group on a conscious level. We are fully aware of these, and we can self-report them. Unconscious attitudes or implicit bias are those things that lie below the surface but certainly influence our behaviors and our decision-making. So there are lots of different types of biases. One that stood out in some of my research, they have one named actually physician bias. And so that's been termed the susceptibility to uncertainty and time pressure surrounding the diagnostic process, which may promote reliance on stereotypes for efficient decision-making. So what we may think as efficient decision-making may actually not be what's best for our patients in the long run. And so all of these things have been known to be related to ongoing healthcare disparities. And healthcare disparities can really show itself in any part of healthcare, whether it's from accessing healthcare, preventing or preventative measures. Health literacy certainly can showcase a lot of disparity. Our treatment outcomes and our health outcomes are also where we see a lot of healthcare disparities. And, COVID has certainly, we're still practicing COVID safety measures by being hybrid. So it's clearly had an impact on our everyday lives. But I think it really kind of shined a light on the inequity that we did see in COVID, in healthcare, through COVID. And so those are just examples of really the larger picture of healthcare disparities that are happening in this country. So healthcare, or health disparities rather, are the potentially avoidable differences in health status between populations solely linked to social advantage or disadvantage. And so when we think about different groups or populations of people, which groups tend to enjoy a better health status, which groups enjoy a worse health status, and that difference in between those two groups is what is a health disparity. Healthcare disparities are potentially avoidable differences in the incidence, prevalence, mortality, and burden of disease and other health conditions that exist among several populations in the U.S. So healthcare disparity research is not new.
and often starts with activism and coalition building. And, you know, being in Berkeley, I'm kind of at the hub. I've learned of activism and coalition building. And so people on the ground have always known what's most affecting their communities and have brought it to the attention of policymakers, healthcare providers, and you know, central government systems to try to make change. And so that's nothing new, and that's really, I would say, lays the groundwork for healthcare disparity research. And through healthcare disparity research, the U.S. healthcare system decided, this is several decades ago now, that, you know, to have a good health care system, we need, initially it started with 5 aims. And so to have a quality system, we have to have effectiveness, it has to be patient-centered, it must be timely, it has to be safe, it has to be efficient. And it wasn't until much later that they realized that they needed to actually add a 6th aim, and that was equity. And so our healthcare needs to be equitable. And again, I mentioned this was several decades ago where this, these 5 initially and then 6 aims came about. In 2010, the Institution of Medicine did a follow-up report to kind of see how we were doing in providing this quality health care, particularly in reducing health disparities. And they found, in regards to equity, while some of the other aims had improved, there had been little progress in the equity arm of things, and it has been coined the forgotten aim. So while we're having kind of a resurgence of talking about equity and health disparities, it's not a new conversation, but really kind of a continuation of decades worth of work, and hopefully we'll do a better job at getting it right, hopefully, this time around, or at least making a bit more progress than what we've done in the past. So equity is the state, quality, or ideal of being just, impartial, and fair, which is different than being equal, which I'll demonstrate with this pictograph. So we have inequality, the unequal access to opportunities. And so this picture really demonstrates that we have one side of the tree that's bearing abundant fruit. The fruit is a bit more accessible to the person on the ground. It's just, you know, falling into their arms. Whereas the person on the right has, the fruit is out of reach, and the little fruit that is there, which is even smaller in size, is out of reach. And that side of the tree in general is just not bearing enough fruit. So that, you know, that's an example of inequality. So what about equality? Because a lot of times we hear people talking about we need to make the system equal, and how does equality differ from equity? So if we make things equal, that's the even distribution of tools and assistance. So everybody gets the same thing. We make access equal for everyone. So if we give both of these people here the same height ladder, we've actually only made getting to the fruit a little bit easier for the person who maybe didn't need the access in the first place, whereas the person who maybe needed even more assistance didn't get enough. They got a little bit, but not enough to actually make a difference. And so if we then start to become equity-minded people, we customize our tools that identify and address inequality, which accounts for adjustments for individuals. And so with an equitable system, we actually provide the assistance tailor-made to the people that need it. So we have the person who was able to have easier access to the fruit have even more access, and then even more assistance to the person where it was really just completely out of reach. Now the question is, can we go a step further than equity? So a lot of times our thought process stops at equity. How do we actually go beyond equity? So there is a level beyond equity, and it's justice. And so while we provide tools and assistance in the previous 2 pictures, we actually didn't fix the structural issue, which was the tree. And so that was quite literally the root of the problem. So you have a tree where one side is not bearing enough
fruit. Perhaps that side is in the shade. We see that part of the tree is bent over. So if we actually fix the structure of the system, then providing equal access to tools and assistance makes sense in a just system. So when we think about equity in the context of health and healthcare, health equity means everyone has a fair and just chance to reach their best health. Healthcare equity means equitable access, experience, and outcomes for every patient. And healthcare equity plus equity in social determinants of health equals health equity. So we need to have these things plus address the social determinants of health, which I'll actually come back to talking about in a few slides. So when we think specifically of eye care disparities, we can think about disparities by population, we can think about disparities by disease. And there's often quite a bit of overlap, regardless of which route you decide to go down. And so as an example, when we think about disparities by population, so race and ethnicity, I hope by this time we do have a better understanding that people who have been in historically marginalized groups tend to have worse health outcomes, worse visual health outcomes than other groups. And so these groups tend to be at greater risk of losing their vision from a variety of eye diseases. They're less likely to be screened for diabetic retinopathy, for example, and have a higher prevalence and more severe forms of the disease. And this then disproportionately is affected by poverty and lower socioeconomic status. So we can see that there is an intersection happening when we categorize folks by both socioeconomic status as well as being in a marginalized group. Communities that are most affected are those in the Black community, Latinx, and American Indian, and these groups have 2.8 times or more chance of having visual impairment and blindness, which can then impact ability, rehabilitation, and access to care. When we then start to think about populations in a different kind of way, more in settings, you have your rural populations and your urban populations. And so there's a maldistribution of health professionals in rural populations. And over the years, that has just gotten worse. So I showed a picture of my family earlier. They live in a rural population. I grew up in the country, and so hospitals that I went to as a child no longer exist. So these facilities are closing, meaning we're reducing the access of care for people to be able to get, which then becomes an important part for us as optometrists and those working in the healthcare optometric field to be important, because it really aligns with us being able to be primary care doctors in communities. And so 20% of the total U.S. population lives in non-metropolitan areas. 50% of them have a primary health care provider shortage. Again, this is where optometry really is primed to fill that kind of gap and need. Only 10% of all practicing physicians are based in rural areas. So lack of access is influenced by affordability and eye care coverage and insurance, which is always an ongoing battle in our field. Lack of transportation and availability of eye care providers, most being more than 60 minutes away from the average person living in these rural communities, and delay in referrals from primary care doctors and lack of knowledge, both on the patient end as well as the primary physician end, about the risks for vision loss or blindness, a real lack of education. Another population that we need to consider is the aging population. And I think we are becoming more aware of these statistics, that 20% of the population will be 65 years or older by 2040. That's less than 20 years from now. The 85 and older population will triple by 2050. That's less than 30 years from now. So all of these things are going to happen in our lifetime for the people who are sitting here and on the call. And there's an anticipated 25% increase in visual impairment and blindness by 2050, again, which coincides with this aging population. About just under 4% of the elderly population lives in nursing homes, and of those, about 70% of them are affected by vision impairment and blindness. So then the question is, are we as optometrists in these nursing homes providing this kind of care? Of course, impairment and blindness leads to physical and functional disability, higher health costs, poor psychological health, and a lower quality of life. We see differences in sex and gender as another population, and certain eye diseases are more common in females. There are various genetic predispositions, autoimmune disorders, dry eye. So a lot of things that we need to remember to consider when taking care of different sexes in our exam room, and then different gender identities as well. So disparities by eye disease, and I'm not going to go through each eye condition disparity. I think generally speaking, we can understand the pattern here and just know whether we're taking care of a person who just simply needs glasses, or a person who is diabetic and has retinopathy or cataracts. We're going to continue to see disparities by disease. And just calling your attention to this article, which I thought is pretty significant in where the conversation is going in eye care when we think about disparities in eye care. So it's titled Racial and Socioeconomic Differences in Eye Care Utilization Among Medicare Beneficiaries with Glaucoma. And what the authors found, they stratified the people in the study by race and ethnicity as well as socioeconomic status. Because again, we tend to believe that if you have better socioeconomic status, you'll have better health care, which probably generally speaking is the case. But what they found in their research is that, and what their conclusion was actually, is that disparities among Black and Hispanic patients with glaucoma persisted even after stratification by socioeconomic status, suggesting that systemic racism may be an independent driver in this population. And so to my knowledge and experience, this is the first time I've seen in a eye care study the explicit use of systemic racism as a subjective factor for the outcomes that we're seeing. So I think this is a huge step, and I think we need to have more of this research so we can have the appropriate conversation and take the appropriate measures to make change. And so I'd mentioned social determinants of health earlier in terms of all the factors that we need to think about, including our healthcare system, and how people are able to get the best quality care and treatment. And so all of the different factors that can influence health are economic stability, the neighborhood and physical environment where people live. Do they have adequate housing? Is their neighborhood safe? Education and literacy, food security, and then again, is there community involvement? Is it stressful just to live in the neighborhood where you live in? Is there a lot of violence and trauma and or police brutality? So all of these factors filter in addition to the healthcare system in one's experience to getting the care that they need. Barriers beyond sociodeterminants of health include external factors such as lack of integrated health information technology, long wait times for appointments, lack of coordination between providers, and of course unconscious bias. Internal factors, meaning patient-specific factors that could create a barrier, include their psycho-emotional state, so depression, anxiety, maybe having preconceived notion about going to the doctor, how they be treated at the doctor, or just illness in general may prevent them from actually showing up. This includes fear, denial, and forgetfulness. And so really being able to have people who they can trust in order to overcome some of those internal barriers are also going to be important solutions to some of these issues. So solutions. Community engagement and targeted interventions is going to be a huge solution to this problem of health disparities and eye care disparities.
One solution that is a not tapped enough, I guess, resource are federally qualified healthcare centers. And currently, 70% of those do not have on-site eye care in those facilities. So that would be a huge way to reach a vast majority of patients, is simply being in one of these FQHCs. Doing routine school screenings to catch disease processes or simply the need for glasses early so we can treat them. So then these patients and students have the ability to really take full advantage of their education that they're given. Improve patient education and engagement. Education plus targeted intervention has been found to actually be the most helpful. So kind of providing education in a silo or providing intervention in a silo, they're helpful, but combining both of those two things together is really what makes a difference for patients. Improving workforce diversity is also going to be an important ongoing intervention. And, you know, there are plenty of studies showing that patient-physician concordance, meaning if the patient and the physician have something in common, whether it's race and ethnicity, whether it's language, they can speak the same language, growing up in the same kind of environment or neighborhood or country, anything that kind of allows people to feel like they belong, you know, as a word to use, helps to improve healthcare outcomes and treatment adherence. And then, of course, ongoing bias awareness and culturally responsive care training, and embracing technology, which are two of the points out of the solutions that I want to highlight a little bit more in depth. So when we think about our biases, what can I do personally to combat our biases? And so acknowledgement, awareness, and action are going to be keys to helping to combat our biases. And biases are something that we all have. We're all susceptible. We all have them. And we all have to do work to recognize them and mitigate them. And so that's one of the first steps. Acknowledge your susceptibility to your bias and be able to have the courage to recognize them when they come up. And so when we're doing this work, we want to lead with cultural humility. And so cultural humility, which is a little different than cultural competency. I think of cultural competency as really the more tangibles, the knowledge, the skills that I acquire to become culturally competent. And cultural humility kind of wraps it around, it's like a warm hug around cultural competency, because that means I've committed to the lifelong process of learning, because I can't possibly know everything about everybody's culture. And so I'm willing to learn on a daily basis on how to best approach and treat and take care of people. This requires engagement in self-reflection, self-critique, and respectful partnering with patients, and this makes competence more dynamic. Again, it's not a fixed state of being. I know how to be competent culturally, and I can check that box. There's no box to check. It's an ongoing process. Awareness strategies, exploring our biases, being kind to ourselves as we're doing this exploration, because you might find yourself something coming to the surface and you're even shocked that you have this own thought or feeling about a person or group of people that has always been unconscious before, but now you're doing the work to be more conscious of these things. And it can sometimes be a little bit shocking. So giving yourself grace as you're doing this work, as you're discovering your biases, as well as you're learning how to mitigate them, is an important part of the process, as is organizational awareness. And so it's one thing for us individually to take on this task, but organizationally, what are we doing as a whole to become less biased, more engaged in our community, and actually part of the solutions. So as we explore our biases, we want to conceptualize implicit bias as a habit of mind. It's just something that it's become rote, it's just become a natural state of our being, and we have to initiate intentional behavior change, and it is very difficult to change behavior, as I learned in my public health classes. So first, we acknowledge the existence, we identify what they are, consider where they came from. Where did you hear this messaging? How did you develop this bias in the first place? Accept the emotional effort that comes along with it, but don't get stuck there. So if you get angry, if you get sad, fine. Those are normal responses to finding out maybe you thought a little bit less of or unkindly of about someone or someone else. The point is, how am I going to change now that I'm aware of this? So one of the things I like to think about as a way to remember is to flex. So when we're thinking about making these changes, is flex. So focus within, tune into your emotions, but don't let them overtake you. Recognize how your experiences has shaped your perspective, stick to facts and don't make assumptions, and turn frustration into curiosity. And lead from a place of why, I've learned over the years. Learn about others. Recognize how our experiences have, my experiences has shaped you as your experiences have shaped you. Consider how they might see a situation and what's important to them and why that might be different than how you consider them, and think about how your actions may have impact on them. Engage in dialogue. Ask open questions. Listen to understand, not to debate. I wish there was much more of that going on in this country right now. Offer your views without being defensive or combative. Disentangle impact from intent, and avoid blame. Learning is about learning, not blaming, and expand the options. Bring people into the brainstorming and solution-seeking process. Experiment. Sometimes the first thing you do might not work, so try again, and evaluate and seek out diverse perspectives and experiences. So that was just a very brief review of some important terminology, healthcare disparities generally, eye care disparities specifically, and why, and biases, and why we really need to tune into this more so as a profession. And now I want to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at Berkeley Optometry. And so as the director of DEI, I have established some priorities in my time there. Before I get to the priorities, I will just define quickly diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Should be mostly obvious to people, but sometimes it's good to go over even the things that should be obvious. So diversity, diverse just means you have a variety of people. We're talking about people, not fruit. You can have diversity in anything. But in regards to people, people who are made up of different races, ethnicities, socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds, various lifestyles, experiences, and interests. So we seek a diverse group of people in our student body, in our faculty body, and our staff body. Equity, which you talked about earlier, proportional access and representation in opportunities. So the division of resources based on need. Inclusion, an environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, have equal access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute fully to the organization's success. So it's one thing to be there and to be a person who makes a class or organization diverse, but do I actually feel like I'm included? Am I being asked for my opinion? Am I being asked to be involved in the decision-making of the organization? So that's how a person feels included. And then belonging, fulfilling the emotional desire to be an accepted member of a group. And a lot of times that's where I do see people struggle, and quite a lot of our students have come up to me and say, you know, I just don't feel like I belong here, and I struggle with that. And so how do we get a person to feel they belong? And sometimes it's just the smallest things. We had our white coat ceremony last week, Friday, and I went up and, you know, shook one of the students' hands and talked to his mom, and it was just a simple thing that I think any of us here would do, right? And he sent me a very nice email and said, thank you so much for coming over to talk to my mom and I. It really meant a lot of us, and it really was welcoming. It made me feel like I belonged there. So again, nothing special. I shook their hands and I said hello, and how much of a pleasure and how excited I was
of have them at the school. And so creating that sense of belonging, I think is really, to me, a top priority, even more so than diverse recruitment. Because if I can get people who actually like being where they are and can spread the word about how awesome we are, then I actually don't have to work that hard for recruitment, right? But we don't always think that way. So the 4 priorities as the DEIB director is recruitment and retention, and those are obviously a little bit more straightforward. So we want to increase the optometry and vision science underrepresented minority in optometry students, increase faculty representation as well. Belonging and campus climate. So I hinted at that a little bit earlier. We want to create a welcoming and inclusive environment where members of the community feel accepted. Education and curriculum, which is of particular importance to me, is creating ongoing education and training. And really what I want to do is embed these knowledge and skill building within the curriculum. So while I'm simultaneously designing a course that'll be curriculum adjacent, as I like to call it, I do want to get the faculty on board where they take ownership of bringing this information into their courses as well, so that we're all on the same page, we're all speaking the same language, so to speak, and delivering the information to the students in a cohesive manner. And then finally, community engagement. At the internal, so the School of Optometry and Vision Science level, the university level, how are we building community with the Berkeley campus? And then at the external community level, how are we interacting in engagement with our patients, with the community within which we sit, and partnering with key people in the community, and interacting both in professional and non-transactional interactions. And this non-transactional interactions being very important. So professionally, we'll go out and do a screening in the community, things of that nature. It's still kind of work-related, even though we're providing a service. There's non-transactional interactions. Some of the students organizing, going to do painting street murals with the Ohlone tribe recently as a non-transactional interaction, as a way to say, you know, we're here, we support you, we support what you want to do, and we're going to show up for that. We're not giving an eye exam. We're not talking about eyes. We're just here because we're all part of the same community. So some of the things that we've been able to accomplish, we are working on a DEIB strategic plan, which should be completed within the next month. We've started some holistic admissions training to better have the committee, the admissions committee, who are doing the interviewing and that sort of thing, understand what a holistic process is, so that when we have these diverse students coming in, everybody's getting a good experience. Faculty searches, putting in processes to make them equitable, diverse, and committed to the diversity statements that they have to write about when they apply for a position. I started the Vision Science Summer Undergraduate Research Program, which kicked off this past June, and as a way to have undergraduate students for 2 months be paired with the faculty in the Vision Science Department and really get to learn about what vision science is. And that was very exciting. Refocus OptiCamp. OptiCamp has been part of our community for about a decade and a half or longer. But when I say refocusing, it was initially started to specifically reach underrepresented students, first-generation students, et cetera. And along the way, it lost its focus a little bit, and it became kind of a, let me check this box so I can increase my chance of getting into Berkeley optometry. So we're refocusing the purpose of OptiCamp, and I think we've had the opportunity to do this successfully this past July. We've started doing cultural heritage celebrations, having lunches. We'll start having speakers, and again, just more community building activities. And then this March, we're going to have our first DEIB symposium, which I'd like to invite all of you to attend. And as soon as we have more details in terms of date and time, or date for sure, I will pass that along to you. Most importantly are the students, and that will always be a big accomplishment and a big purpose in the work that I'm doing. And I shared that story about the email I received from the student. And those kind of interactions is what keeps me in the work and what drives my purpose. And, you know, I'm helping them, but they're also helping me. Whenever I get notes like that, that reminds me of why I'm doing this work, because it's not always easy to do this work. And so at the end of the day, it's about the students. So call to action, what is or what can be the California State Board of Optometry's role in all of this? So ongoing cultural competency training. So I'm currently the ASCO's chair of the Diversity and Cultural Competency Committee, which I'll be rolling off of this December. And so when I came in, my number one priority as the chair was to reach out to the different state boards on how we can provide CE requirements for cultural competency training as a requirement for ongoing licensure. And right now, we only have one state in this entire country that's actually doing it, and it is Oregon. And so right now, they require 1 hour of cultural competency education every other year. So it's a great start, and I'm sure they had to work very hard to get that 1 hour every 2 years. We need to go further, in my opinion, but again, that's a great start, and I would love to see all the other states take heed of that and really push this as an agenda item as part of their licensing and ongoing licensure process. So the continuum of cultural competency and kind of where we want to think about going. And so, you know, again, cultural competency, it's not finite. It's not something that we check, which is why it needs to be ongoing. I can't just do this one presentation one time and hope that everybody gets what they need from it from the rest of their professional career. It doesn't really work like that. And we do have to understand that competence in any respect is on a continuum. And so people may be at different stages, organizations may be at different stages, but certainly where we're trying to get the vast majority of people is at the competence stage, where we're able to recognize individual and cultural differences, seek advice from diverse groups, hire culturally unbiased staff, and really infuse this as a priority within our organization. Cultural proficiency would be a great goal to get to, where we can actually be the leaders and show everybody else how it's done and how it's done well. But let's get to cultural competency first, and then I think work on cultural proficiency. And so the knowledge, the attitudes, the skills, these learning processes that are important in understanding and what all of that can look like on the journey of cultural competence. But again, remembering cultural humility is that hug around cultural competence, which reminds us that it's an ongoing learning process that we've committed to in order to best engage with our communities and take care of our patients. So as part of the call to action and kind of where we are in different organizations, so the ACOE is on board with this training, and so now all schools are required to meet the 3 bulleted items below. And proudly, this is something as chair of the DCCC, along with the other committee members, we initiated, and this went into effect this past July. And so all graduates at every optometry school must be able to use the knowledge of optometry's role and the roles of other health professions to appropriately assess and address the healthcare needs of the patients and the diverse populations we serve, must apply knowledge of professional, ethical, legal, public health, and DEI principles to the delivery of optometric care, and must demonstrate effective and culturally competent communications, both oral and written, with other professionals and patients. So definitely a particular moment of pride in my service to that committee. We need more work. Obviously, the work is not done.
but we also need accomplices. And please note that I didn't say allies. We need accomplices. And so I need you all to be an accomplice in this mission, working on getting cultural competency CE requirements, and then using your influence in other states with NBEO, with ARVO, so that again, as an entire profession, we are speaking the same language, we are moving in the same direction, and we are all fully understanding that DEIB, cultural competence, bias awareness has to be at the foundation of providing good, equitable care in order to reduce health disparities in eye care. We also need the expansion of telemedicine and health tech. And unfortunately, as a profession, we're a little bit on the slower side to embrace this in our practice because it can really expand the access that people can have if it's done well and if it's actually done equitably. And so we have to really think about, what does the future of eye care look like? What should it look like? How will we be involved? And how do we improve health equity in optometry with technology? And that's actually going to be the theme of the DEIB Symposium this March, which again, you're all invited to, and hoping to have some great discussions around this topic when we have some of the leading experts in this area speak on campus. So that is all I have. Thank you so much for your attention. It's been a pleasure to be here. I will open up for questions, I guess, if anybody has questions.
Oh, go ahead.
Hello, this is Board Member Ross. I just wanted to say thank you very much for that presentation. That was wonderful. And I particularly thank you for coming with those very pertinent action items, things that we can actually do right now to put into play. As somebody who's going to sit on both our education and our telehealth committees, there's some definite action items in here that I look forward to discussing with our other members. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do any of our members who are virtual have any questions or comments?
This is Dr. Garcia. I just want to also say that was an excellent presentation. It really does remind us what our responsibilities are as optometrists and as board members. So thank you, Dr. Shogi.
Thank you.
Oh, this is Board Member Linden. I also wanted to thank you for a really great presentation. And regarding cultural competency CEs, so I know that we just kind of voted on some CE, related regulations. You said that only one state currently requires it, Oregon, CEs for optometry, but it is commonly found in other, in other professions, I believe, right?
In other health professions. I don't think I can say commonly yet, but they've done a better job. They have more states that are on board that are requiring it. So we do have a precedent that we can certainly follow with different states and different professions and their requirements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know like the State Bar, I think they just adopted an implicit bias for their CEs too.
For California?
Yeah.
Okay.
So even if we don't require it, if someone were to take cultural competency CEs, that would count towards their CE requirement under like patient care or something, or? Okay.
I think it would just fall under general. Okay. So there's specific areas, and then there's one little sort of melting pot.
I don't know. I'm just curious, like what percentage of people, without a requirement, how many people actually do take CEs on cultural competency to help meet their requirements?
Dr. Shogi, do you know like how many? There aren't that many courses.
Yeah, I would have to maybe ask the academy folks because they've now just really started offering it. But it's because, me and others have started writing proposals for training. So
I think probably just in the last few years, we've seen it pop up at Academy, and AOA sometimes has it, but I don't know numerically how many people are taking it. Yeah.
I would just, Executive Officer Sean Murphy, kind of a parallel or analogy. Within our statute, we do suggest that licensees take continuing education courses on child abuse and elder abuse. We see a very, very low percentage, if any, courses that relate to those subjects in the audits that we do. So suggestion is great, but it's really a requirement where you get folks to dig in and begin to engage with the content.
Right, exactly. So I would love to push for it being required.
Any other questions or comments? Dr. Shoge, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Won't be the last time.
No.
And I hope this won't be the last time that we see it. So we'll certainly look for you for some continued guidance. I think we'll go through in future agenda items, but I think you've given us some next good steps for how we might begin to develop our own program and who we should be reaching out to. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to item number 8. Dr. Murphy. Ms. Murphy, do you want to, everyone's a doctor today.
Great. Thank you, Board. So our discussion, our item 8 is discussion and possible action on Assembly Bill 2236, optometry certification, and it's now actually entitled one second. Certification to perform advanced procedures. So in the materials, both online and given to the board, you were directed toward the version of the bill that was crossed the desk in August 11th. There were additional amendments that were crossed yesterday. In our analysis of the bill as staff, we see that there has been an intense effort to negotiate the correct standards, the correct expansion of scope within our analysis as staff. We are concerned about the considerations for implementation. We would draw attention to the several places within the bill where the board is charged with approving or authorizing or certifying, and the need for some sort of medical expertise within the board in order to verify those course applications and curriculum, and then also in the reporting nature of the adverse outcomes, the ability to review those reports, know what those reports should entail, review those reports, and then understand what should be asked for as additional substantiation for the optometrist care plan. So we hope that the board will discuss the bill today. We are asking that the board consider a position of oppose unless amend, simply for those implementation considerations, not at all on policy. And we are hoping that we can have the bill language reflect a delayed implementation that will at least reflect the time needed for the regulatory package, moving through the department, agency, and through the Office of Administrative Law. That being particular around 12 to 24 months needed to complete a regulatory package. So we're looking for delayed implementation and then recognition within the fiscal of the bill that we will need medical competency within the board in order to develop and oversee this program initially. We anticipate something of a 3-year delayed implementation, a 3-year temporary position in order to develop the program and create procedures that could then be followed by staff on the board who are civil servants as opposed to physicians, that we could competently protect consumers and develop a comprehensive program that would allow for the certification to perform advanced procedures.
Are there any comments or discussions by our board members?
This is Dr. Garcia. So I think it's clear that we all understand that patient protection, regulation, enforcement, and access to care are all priorities for us at the California State Board of Optometry. But I feel AB 2236 has significant patient protection language already included, and Shar already alluded to some of that, but I'll go into some specifics. 32 hours certification in a classroom format, requires passing by a national board to demonstrate clinical competency, requires a grand rounds preceptorship training, requires 42 complete procedures on humans. These minimums are significant. The bar is set extremely high, and we should not expect a huge influx of certification seekers right off the bat. It's going to take a while, just like glaucoma did. It took several years before the average optometrist practicing was seeking certification. We did see primarily staff from the colleges get on board, of course, sooner. The schools of optometry throughout the U.S. and in California have been teaching these skills with hands-on for many, many years. I just spoke to my associate a few weeks ago about this, and he actually did YAG laser, and they learned how to do it. And we use slit lamps every single day, so the devices that we're talking about using are things that the optometrists that are being trained now are comfortable using, and they're using equipment that we all use in terms of slit lamp microscopes every single day. So we trust these institutions to educate our future optometrists to the highest levels and standards. Their accreditation depends on it, and our patient safety depends on it as well. Just like all previous scope expansions, whether it was immunizations, lacrimal irrigation, glaucoma, they all take time to implement, sometimes years. Yes, it takes a lot of hard work and leadership on behalf of our staff and our board. But regulation, that is what we do at the California State Board of Optometry. This is in our wheelhouse. We need to embrace change as it comes and to meet it head on. Granted, we have current staffing shortfalls, but thankfully our staff is always working extremely hard to maintain our current workload. So hats off to all of our staff. We know that you do a great job. We know that you go above and beyond every single day. But help is on the way. I think Shara mentioned that earlier, that we have new hires coming. And under Shara's leadership and Randy's leadership, we can be successful in increasing our productivity and efficiency as changes come. Like we used to say in the Marine Corps, adapt and overcome. Things are not always easy, but we need to make changes, and we know we can do this. And funding, as we all learned today, and first time for me actually as a board member to look at our budget in this detail, but it's something that needs to be addressed. We all agree that. But all agencies, as we learned earlier this morning, and businesses large and small like mine, face these same fiscal challenges every day. We have increasing labor costs, we have increasing overhead, increasing costs of supplies. All of those things affect everybody. It does not just affect our board, but we can overcome those too. Staff has already begun to eliminate and collect past dues and fines. I think implementing a collections program, increasing and reviewing our fees regularly, and managing overhead will keep us solvent. So we all need to be more proactive and not reactionary like we are doing now. So I would suggest we create a budget committee with quarterly meetings and ensure that we stay on track. Dr. Shogi's presentation today, was very educational, but it was very timely. We all need to strive for health equity in this state, in this country. Why? Because we can't forget the importance of access to eye care. And we're facing a crisis here in the Central California and in most rural areas to access. Here in Tulare and Kings County, where I practice, we have the highest per capita Medi-Cal population in the whole state. And these are the most vulnerable of vulnerable patients. Most are at risk for losing sight or having poor vision. And, you know, access to eye care in rural areas really depends on optometrists. There are very few ophthalmologists in rural areas that accept Medi-Cal. In my area, we have one practice that is in Fresno that accepts Medi-Cal. So within about an 80 to 100-mile radius, we have one ophthalmology practice. And obviously, if you do the numbers, that means our patients either go without care or they wait for several months to get ophthalmology care. So we end up having to be responsible. And something like this would be a game changer, and it would increase access to the most vulnerable patients in our state significantly. Not only are optometrists more well distributed throughout rural areas, but now you have the federally qualified health clinics that are, at least in the Central Valley, literally in every town. And in our area, there's an optometrist in pretty much every one of those federally qualified health clinics. So something like this would increase access significantly, you know, especially where the access is needed the most. So for these reasons and so many others that I don't want to repeat over and over, I strongly recommend the board take a support position on AB 2236. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other comments?
It's Dr. Kawaguchi. Can I ask some questions before I make my comment?
Of course.
So where are we at in the legislative process for 2236?
The bill is currently in third reading on the Senate floor. It will, if passed by the Senate floor, come back to the Assembly for concurrence as it is undergone significant amendment. There may be a requirement by the Assembly Rules Committee for there to be emergency policy hearings because, again, the bill has changed significantly in the Senate. So it's possible that there could be a vote on the Senate floor, then a vote within a Senate or an Assembly committee, and then a vote on the Assembly floor before being enrolled and sent to the governor for signature.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of make some broad comments. So I agree with Dr. Garcia. The scope for the Optometry Practice Act is critical for the access of care for underserved populations in California. The regulations are also critically important because it ensures the quality of care that's delivered with this expanse of scope. So in general, I am a strong believer that as healthcare is evolving, optometry also needs to evolve to meet the needs of the consumers. Dr. Turetsky and I are on the Practice Act work group, and this could have been something that was in our purview. I think that we could have given some advice if we had time to weigh in and, you know, present additional perspective to the board as a whole. It can still be something that we have a discussion with that work group. In addition, it's not been under the purview of the Leg-Reg committee. So I'm having a hard time at this point, timing-wise, with having a strong opinion of support, opposition. I mean, this bill has been going on for a while, and, you know, do we need to make a decision today on a position? And, you know, it could be that a no position could be a possibility as well as far as a decision of the board, but I'm really kind of torn right now based on the timing and information that's been received by us. Thank you.
I think Dr. Ross and Ms. Linden both wanted to make a comment as well.
Yeah, this is Dr. Ross. I agree with both of our other board members' comments in this situation. as we've all discussed here, this bill's been going on for a long time. It's really targeted at expanding the access to care for patients involved with these specialty procedures, which we've talked about are in kind of dire need in these underserved and rural communities in our state. A couple of points, I guess, or comments just to kind of make. One is that, as Dr. Garcia alluded to, these procedures are being actively taught in our optometry schools every day. Students are graduating with this knowledge and have been for years. They simply just can't use those skills. So there's the training program more or less already in place on that front. As far as the number of patients that are required in this situation, 42, 43 total patients of live patient care, pre-procedure, procedure, post-procedure. That's an extensive amount of time. It's going to take a significant effort of going through the education process, completing all of the procedures required. We're talking about probably a multi-year kind of trajectory for somebody to even look at completing a program like this. And like Dr. Garcia mentioned, as when glaucoma was first rolled out, I don't think we're going to see right off the bat a significant number of licensees actively looking to get through this program. But of the ones that do, likely those will be, the ones that will be our qualified educators in optometry schools and programs who we can look to guidance for in the future to assist with this program as we move forward. So, I also understand that this board has to ensure the safety of all of the consumers in our state. Like we said, I think the education model is already there. I think that vote of confidence was given by the legislators who've already supported this bill. So, I think we're kind of primed to move forward. So I agree with the others that I would look to support this legislation.
This is Board Member Linden. I think on principle, I feel like we all agree, and including the board's recommendation as well, I think we all agree that it's important to increase access to care. This could be one way to increase access to care. I think we all support that. I think, especially Dr. Shogi's presentation kind of reaffirmed the fact that there are areas that are severely underserved. They don't have primary care providers. Any way we can access care to people that need it is a great goal. I think we all share that goal. And I don't think anyone is saying that they don't support that and they don't support expanding practice authority. A few questions I have are, though, it talks about we'd have to, licensees would have to complete a board-approved course. Does such a course even exist right now? How long would it take to identify such a course or to create a course if it's not already available? There's other requirements for board-approved training programs. There's a lot of stuff in here that I don't think we've really had a chance to consider before. I know the bill has been working through the process. I think it just got amended 2 months ago to include these changes, so I think it wasn't even amended until after we already had our last board meeting. But in terms of the board recommendation of, essentially just guaranteeing that we have the funding available to do this work that's required, and putting in a delayed implementation that effectively would occur anyways, even if the bill was passed without it, it takes time for the process anyway. So I guess it's hard for me to see the harm in including a delayed implementation when realistically that delayed implementation is going to be built in just based on the regulatory process. So I'm not quite sure what the issue is with that.
So I know that Christine Schultz of the COA is here, and should we take I know she can answer some questions about current education programs. And should we do public comment now, or? Well, I'm going to invite Ms. Schultz to at least tell us about education programs, and then we can talk about regulatory packages and the need for a delayed rollout.
Well, thank you, everyone. Christine Schultz, representing the California Optometric Association. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. To your point, there are 32-hour courses available. That's the standard course that most states use to train optometrists for these procedures. I'm sorry? Oh, sure. Sorry about that. To your point, as I was saying, there is a 32-hour course that exists now, and the bill is written so that that course could count towards this requirement. The 32-hour course is what's done in other states to be able to train these optometrists to be able to perform these procedures. This bill requires not only a 32-hour course, then you have to take the national board test, then you have to complete 43 procedures on live humans, either through a preceptorship, through a grand rounds and through a preceptorship, actually. So that does exist, and from our perspective, the requirement is for the board to approve that course, and they can do that through a public process by getting input through, public expert input through optometry and ophthalmology. There's an opportunity to have testimony from both sides so that you can hear and determine whether or not it's appropriate. Same goes for the training program that the board would have to approve that's done by the colleges. The colleges are going to be the ones to put that together. So from our perspective, we didn't envision the board needing to hire an ophthalmologist to be able to, on staff, to be able to provide that expertise, because once the college puts that program together, it can be presented at a board meeting, and again, you can get expert opinion at that point from ophthalmology, from optometry, from medical board, whoever you want to get, whoever comes in to provide that information. The reason, I have been working with Shara. She has provided lots of great opinions and expert advice for us as we were moving through this process. We were able to take amendments that, we lifted the cap on the certificate fees so that you can charge whatever the cost is for implementation. So that is in the bill to make sure that you have the money available to enforce this law. We also took amendments based on input from Shara to make sure that the reporting is done every 2 years versus every year to make it easier to implement. So we made that change too. But when it comes to the delayed implementation, our attorneys felt like it wasn't necessary because everything in the language is contingent upon the board taking action. You are in control of the timeline. There's not anything that we can do to force your hand to move faster on this. So, there's no deadlines in the bill. Other legislation that you guys have been dealing with had deadlines that you had to meet, like, for example, the mobile clinic stuff. That all had deadlines in it. This bill does not do that. And so we also, the other thing is this bill is pretty prescriptive. Unlike other scope of practice expansion like glaucoma, where you had to determine the training and what the training was going to entail. That is not in here. It is very prescriptive what you have to do. So you can look to see, does this course meet these requirements, yes or no? And if it does, then you can approve it. So it's not as open-ended as past enforcement. From our perspective, the first the initial requirement for the board is to approve that education. So you got a 32-hour course to approve, and then the course with the live patients to approve. And then you have to do a form. And the rest of this is really the harder stuff where it comes to the continued competency requirements. Those are all after someone's been licensed for 2 years. So you have a little bit more time to come up with how that's going to work and how that's going to be implemented. So we would hope that the law could be implemented fairly quickly, at least get it started and going so that people can begin the training requirements. Let's see. Oh, I just want to make sure that you're aware on the amendments. We took amendments yesterday, and they removed subdivision K, which is the requirement for the qualified educator to notify their licensing board of their participation in the education. So there's less for you to do there. The medical board didn't like that language either and wanted it out. So it also makes it so you don't have to establish standards and expectations for the licensee. So that's out as well with the new amendments that you may not be aware of. So we really did try to craft a law that would address, the board's concerns and make sure that you have what you need to be able to move forward.
And when it comes to your support or opposed position, if you could do a support position and in the letter say, we support the policy of this bill. It has great information, it has great public protection provisions, but you can express concerns about having enough staff to be able to implement that without having an opposed position. Right now, we are past the amendment deadline. There's a 72-hour rule, so I cannot make any amendments to this bill if I wanted to. And that's it. I can be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Schultz?
Yeah, this is Jeff Garcia. No question, but thank you, Christine, for the update. I think that alleviates at least most, if not all, of the concerns that some of us had regarding implementation, especially that there are no deadlines or timelines or wickets that we have to meet. I think that the key, just like with all of the other implementations that we've done in the past, is communication to the applicants, communication to our patients. I think that is going to be really important. But I think if we do that piece right, I think we can move forward without feeling a lot of that stress from the public and from the licensees. Thank you.
So I have a question about regulatory packages. So what would be entailed? Because this would, I'm assuming, would be a fairly large regulatory package. Sorry, can you tell us, or is there someone on staff that could tell us, like, what we're sort of looking at, and then timeline there?
I hate to look at worst case scenario to bring up the worst possible, but as you saw today, we have been negotiating a continuing education regulatory package for the last 5 years, and are now have a package. Well, we have language that can become a package that will then be sent through the DCA and agency and Department of Finance to then be brought back to us to then be sent to the Office of Administrative Law. So what we're talking about here is that in order to implement a regulatory package, I think it's very prescriptive what needs to be done. Unfortunately, the board does not have the internal competency to say, oh yes, we see that the professional schools are doing as it says in the bill. And I believe it would be against our duty of consumer protection to simply, without internal knowledge, approve those courses without having had a check or done any sort of research on the other programs that are available across the country. I'm also concerned because there's a discrepancy for me, and I'm just going to say I don't know what I don't know, that these programs have been taught for years, but then it is my understanding that these programs have only been enacted in our California schools for a year or two. They are teaching outside of scope so that students are able to practice in other states, but it's not as though this coursework, particularly to advanced procedures, has been taught for many years. So my concern is that we will need to negotiate a package, a regulatory package that says this is how we will receive these applications, these are how we will verify these courses, this is how we will then verify the reports that are issued or that are sent to the board by licensees who become certified. We'll need to develop all of the regulations around that, and then we'll move into the time frame of 12 to 18 months that we recognize will need to go through the administrative law process to have the packet approved. So I say I don't like worst case scenarios, but I really feel like this is an important expansion of scope. This is an access issue, but if we can't implement the program competently and tell consumers that we've done our due diligence, that we've created a regulatory package that looks at how we implement the charges that we've been given, then we haven't followed consumer protection. And we're at a point where I think, a hearing is a great way to go about things, but there's also to be said that we use these meetings in order to negotiate the things that this board does. Again, on the outside, 5 years for a continuing education course. The ability to have someone with medical knowledge on staff would mean that we have the ability to, in a timely manner, determine that these courses are appropriate, do our due diligence in researching other states and the national examination to be able to say, indeed, California's courses map to the law and are making sure that licensees, that providers are equipped and ready to provide this advanced care. So that is to say, a regulatory package takes at least 12 to 18 months, but that's when you've got a final product developed, when you've determined how the program will work, and you have legal language reviewed by DCA Counsel, reviewed by this board, reviewed again by DCA Counsel, that says this is how we're going to implement this program. In no way is staff trying to torpedo the idea of scope expansion. What we're concerned about is consumer protection and the ability to implement a competent program whereby we can say we have been a check on those outside of the board who are developing this content and determining whether or not optometrists will be allowed to practice these advanced services.
But there's no time limit, right? So I guess my confusion was that we're asking for delayed implementation, but then Ms. Schultz is saying that there is no deadline for any kind of implementation since it's up to the board. So we could take 1, 2, or not that we want to, 3 or more years to get a regulatory package together, and we could get the medical and professional knowledge that we needed to verify all of the courses. So
this is true, but I just want to call another example to everyone's attention. Our immunization authority that was presented or was passed by the legislature prior to my coming here, we were unable to get a regulatory package passed or approved by the board and then moved to AOL. And at that point, our ability to do the competent research and provide a package that would ensure implementation was deemed unnecessary, and the legislature stepped in order to tell us how to do the program. So our inability to do the research, develop a competent program, get through the OAL process, and provide a regulatory package by which we could guide the immunization simply meant that the legislature then decided for us how the program would be run. So I'm saying that if we want the board professional knowledge here to be a part of how the program is implemented, if we want to do our due diligence in medical consultancy, in making sure that outside entities are doing as the law says and as we will regulate, that there is a need for more time to implement this program and that we should be honest about it up front. I think that Dr. Garcia made a very good point earlier about communication, and bill language really is our first opportunity to communicate. And here we are implying to licensees that somehow when this bill passes on January 1, 2023, they've got lasers. And that is not the case. There will be a long run up to when this occurs. Some of that time we can't even estimate, but we certainly can estimate the time for a regulatory package. And building that into the bill language allows us to immediately communicate to stakeholders and to practitioners that this is something that will not be immediately available to you, but we will need time to implement.
So couldn't we just let stakeholders know that because it'll take time to build a regulatory package, that correct me if I'm wrong, but if they take the course, they only have 2 years. The course is only valid for 2 years because that was the same thing with injections. And I think the problem with injections is that we passed the law, the law was passed, and then there was problem with language, and so a whole bunch of people took the course, and then they were very worried that their two-year class expiration was coming up. And so I know we got a large influx of optometrists who wanted their injection privileges because there was that lag and where we actually had a bill that had correct language. So if it does get passed and implemented, January 1, 2023 comes around, if we let stakeholders know that you can't take the course right now because we don't even have a regulatory package even started, don't take the course until we let you know we're within that 2-year window, then that builds us time to get the regulatory package, to do the research, and then only then could we say, let's go ahead and you can now start taking the courses and go forward from there. So I guess my thing is that this delayed implementation, if there's no deadline for the state board, we actually have more time than we realize. Plus, as Dr. Ross said, there is not going to be a huge influx of optometrists who are going to be able to get certified right away. Are there any other comments?
I have a connected question. It's Dr. Kawaguchi. Can I ask a connected question to Shara? So Shara,
yes,
when you suggested delayed implementation, can you give us more specifics of what you wanted to suggest?
We could simply say that the bill would be enacted in 2024, 2022, 2023. The bill would be enacted as of 2024 or 2025. That would give us the time in order to go through the regulatory package timeline, develop our program, and then it's what will happen, because that's the process. That's what we'll need to do. But our ability to communicate that up front and our ability to have the appropriate resources, we haven't scratched at that yet. There have been some changes in the authority for the board, but as I say, the approval of these courses, the approval of the reports, we don't have internally the subject matter experts to help us in that. And I do not believe that the current fiscal reflects the need to bring that sort of subject matter expert medical consultant onto the board for a limited time period even to help us develop this program competently and provide checks on the outside stakeholders who are providing this new content in order to support the expansion of scope.
Okay, so my follow-up question is, what difference does it make when a bill is enacted if we don't have the regulations in place to be able to execute the new law? So what difference does it make? So I'm kind of confused about if the bill passes and it goes into law January 2023, but we're still building a regulatory package that takes, I'm just going to assume, 4 years. It's not going to be actually executed on. Optometrists aren't going to be able to get this certification until then. So I'm unclear about what you're saying about bill implementation versus us being able to put together the package to actually implement the new law.
So Dr. Kawaguchi, we have Sabina from legal who is coming to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Sabina with the legal department here, division. I'm not sure if this helps, but I have experienced this with a lot of other clients and boards, and if there truly isn't already a date in the bill, and again, I'm not your counsel and I haven't reviewed the bill I'm not as intimately familiar as you are, it might be at your advantage for there not to be a date there because of all the obstacles that you're citing. Absolutely. The problem is if you push it, say, another year and you still don't have anything ready, then now does it look even worse that you weren't ready after you had a delayed implementation date? Right now, if it's open, you have plenty of time to be working on it without going over a date that's in the statute. Just a consideration.
Ms. Schultz.
Sure, I have one other point. I just wanted to speak to the immunization because I understand your concern there. That was, I think, frustrating for everybody. In that bill, there was no clawback date, I guess you will, of the 2 years that's in the statute, that's going to be in the statute, hopefully. So people didn't know when they took the course, they didn't know that they would have this time frame of waiting. Now that there is that language in there that says, you only go 2 years, and then we can
tell people about the regulatory package, that there is going to be a lag here, we can inform people that there's going to be a lag, and we can hopefully prevent them from taking the course thinking everything's going to be fine. You know, as an association, we thought, oh, it's just a form you had to approve, so it shouldn't take that much time. So we didn't tell people to delay taking that course and to be aware, so that's, I think, where you got a lot of pushback. That's not going to be the case with this bill. So that's it.
Oh, this is Member Linden. I just want to confirm what you had said earlier, that you can no longer make any amendments to the bill?
That's right. It's up and down vote at this point. There's a 72-hour rule. Amendments have to be in print for 72 hours. It still has to go to the Assembly. So the timeline that we're, the end of the legislative session is August 31st.
Mm-hmm. And it's being heard on Monday?
It's being heard on Monday, potentially Tuesday.
And I have a question for Shara. So without any specific language ensuring that there is some type of funding available for staff to actually do this package, what do you see happening if that funding is not explicit?
So our analysis was given to, and I apologize, we are working on a staff shortage. So I have had to do this legwork on my own and try to make sure that I could analyze the bill and be able to give you some input on its implementation specifically. We were given an opportunity to give an analysis of the resources needed. That did not include the medical consultants that we needed that became so clear in this last version, or second to last version of the bill. When we go to write our next BCP, dependent upon this legislation, we will be told that there are not the number of positions or the classification of positions available and stated in order to do the work. So we'll basically be limited in who we're able to hire based upon the fiscal analysis that's currently on the bill, which does not include resources for medical consultants.
One other point, but we did, just to let you know, we did take off the cap. There was a $150 cap on the fee that you could charge. That cap is gone. So there's no limit on how much you can charge for the certificate. Their certificate fee is whatever it needs to be to cover the costs of the bill. So, you're right that there's a different process for hiring staff. You have to justify the need for that every step, but in the legislation, there shouldn't be any barrier to you hiring who you need to hire.
So the internal process, though, it still stays to what the fiscal is. So even though we might be able to justify the work, in prior BCPs, we have been told, yes, the workload does say that you need 1.7 people, basically 2. We will give you 1 because the fiscal analysis gave you 1. So I think it's important that the board know, for this legislation, future legislation, that our ability to accurately interpret what will be needed to implement a new program really does dictate the resources we'll be able to hire on the back end in order to get the work done.
This is Member Linden. I have another question, or I guess a comment. Earlier you had said that there are already existing education courses on this, and I appreciate what Shara had said about even if there are, courses and things available that are kind of, maybe known in the schools and stuff, I do think it's important that we can't just defer everything to, even an optometry school or an association or the profession. I think it is important that we all feel that the board itself, and we as the board members, especially myself as a public member, I don't have the expertise. And, I think our board staff are not necessarily optometrists. And so, I think it's very important for us to feel like we have that competency as a board and as board staff, to fully understand everything. I don't ever want to feel like we're rubber stamping something because this, this state does it, or this school does it, or this group does it. So I do think it's very important to have that competency within ourselves. I am curious, though, with regards to other types of scope expansions in the past that have required approval of, training or courses, things of that nature, evaluations and reporting and stuff like that. Has it been done in the past where you typically do bring on some type of subject matter expert, someone who is an optometrist or an ophthalmologist?
So unfortunately, we don't have the institutional knowledge on that the development of that program. So we're not aware. We have to take it on the word of those who were a part of this industry at that time, that there was not. But we actually do not have internal records that tell us the procedures or the resources we use to build that program, particularly around glaucoma. I think most folks have tried to create a similarity between the program creation there, but we are not aware what steps or resources were used in order to create that program.
I mean, I can provide some background for that if you want. I mean, I was around, and you have to take my word for it, I suppose. The board did contract with Dr. Carnevale to draft the education standards for the glaucoma law. So there was a contracted out individual who dealt with that issue during the development of those. But again, that's when you were developing all of the training. You had to determine what type of procedures, what is it going to look like, all the details of it. And so having somebody from the college made a whole lot of sense to develop that. This is my understanding, because it's so prescriptive, isn't going to require that type of expertise, but it's just a difference of opinion here.
Are there any other comments from any of the board members? Mr. Moderator, if we could open the queue for public comment, please.
Absolutely. We are now accepting public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. I'm going to start by contacting Bonnie. Bonnie, we've sent you a request to unmute your microphone. All right, let's move on. Bonnie, we're going to send you another request.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. My comment was previous regarding the DEA, not this, although I am in full support of it. I just wanted to tell you the directors at Academy are talking about DEI speakers for the future. So going back one segment, that's all I wanted to tell you. So we are looking into it, and hopefully it will be implemented across the country.
And that was our only request for comment.
Thank you.
Can I ask Bonnie a question? This is Dr. Kawaguchi.
Sure.
So Bonnie, if AB 2236 goes through and the education program is already in place at Marshall B. Ketchum, how long would it take you or your organization to put together an education for doctors that have already graduated?
You're talking about the laser legislation that we're talking about right now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right now, we have plans with COA to train 50 people from, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Nate Lighthizer from Oklahoma, who already has this program that Christine was talking about. So we are going to do faculty and COA members. We have not put this out to the public yet.
one more.
Sorry, Christine Schultz would like
Sure,
to make.
I have one last thing. I just want to comment on that. Yes, we are doing a laser course here, and we did it before we knew that this bill was getting so close. And we are telling people, making clear to people that, you know, this may not count. You may have to take this whole thing again. So we're trying to be really clear that this, because of the way the law is read, you're learning it, but you might have to learn it again. And additionally, I just want to make clear that if you take an opposed unless amended position, that's the same position ophthalmology took. So now we're in a floor fight, so people are going to be walking around saying the Board of Optometry is opposed. They're not going to make the distinction that, oh, it's because of staff resources. They're going to say the Board of Optometry has an opposed unless amended position, and you need to, you know, if you have these concerns, you can still write a support letter on the policy of the bill, but make those concerns expressly included in your letter so that you're on the record.
I want to thank you for that perspective, Christine, but I think I've got to step in as the day-to-day operations of the board, that whether or not we side with another association is of no concern to consumer protection. So I think that although those are comments that, you know, certainly do, you know, talk about the political landscape, they do not speak to our consumer protection concerns here in this room.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Stacy. I think where I'm having a little bit of confusion is if there's no timeline, what does the delayed what does delaying it gain us? I think I'm finding a little confusion there. Because if there's no
So for staff,
timeline, can't we already anticipate a delay in that? Or am I interpreting that wrong?
So for staff particularly, this has been a pain point, as we were speaking of earlier within the immunization certification, that because the law became law, there was a feeling that suddenly practitioners could knock on the door of the board and say, I need to be certified, when in fact we needed to go through a lengthy process to develop the program and then have the regulatory package approved. So in communication, and as much as we try to communicate to licensees, we of course know that our resources for that communication are limited. That this bill language is an opportunity for us to say quite clearly, this is not something that stands up on July or January 1 of 2023. It gives the expectation that we have a process through which we'll need to do this, because otherwise the board is seen as unable to provide the authority that the legislature has authorized. That we are then not doing our job to be able to make this program available and the access available to consumers.
Okay, so it's a kind of like a resource and expectation issue.
Yes, agreed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so are there any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I am going to call for a motion.
This is Dr. Garcia, I move that we write a letter of support, or I move that we support the bill and write a letter stating the concerns of the board regarding staffing and budget. But I believe time is of the essence. You know, we cannot amend this bill at this time. We just learned that. So, you know, this opportunity may not come this way again. So I think, you know, if we are looking at what is best for the consumer and access to care and all those things that we've already talked about for the past hour, I think it's clear. Our counsel and Christine has outlined that having no date is better than specifying a date. So again, I move to support.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, Dr. Ross seconds. Mr. Moderator, if you would open up the queue for public comment.
We are now taking public comment on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment.
This is Member Linden. I just want to clarify that the motion was to support, not support, if amended.
That's correct, right, Dr. Garcia? Support only?
Support
No,
only
support with amendment.
with no amendments because amendments are not an option at this point. Support only.
If we don't have any public comment, I want to make a final comment. It's Dr. Kawaguchi.
We do not have any requests for public comment at the moment.
So this is really a large bill, and so I just wanted to let Shara know that I understand where she's coming from, because the CE changes that we have tried to implement have been so frustrating to me, and it has been connected to staffing, our need to initiate BCPs. We've been turned down on BCPs in the past. It's not an easy process. We alone as a board will not be able to implement this into law quickly if we don't have the support of our entire eye care community. And I know that the COA will be there lock hand with us, and if we have to walk into the governor's office to let them know that we need staff, we need BCPs to go through to be able to implement something that has become a law, I think that's going to be the critical steps after, because I am hopeful about expansion of scope, but I am nervous about it, because I agree with Shara that we as a board have a responsibility to ensure implementation so that we protect the public. And there's not going to be a simple roadmap for this because it's a big one. So I just wanted to make that as my final statement.
Any other comments before we take our vote? Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Member Hancock,
I would vote aye.
okay. Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
Member Linden, abstain. Member Moridomi, absent. Dr. Pruitt, absent. Dr. Ross,
Aye.
Member Sims, absent. Member Yu,
I vote aye.
Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
and Dr. Wong.
I vote aye.
Okay, so that is 6 ayes, so the measure passes.
That moves us to our,
Closed session. Oh, no, the future
agenda item.
Thank you, everybody, for your discussion. It was very enlightening. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 10, which is future agenda items. Does anyone have anything that they would like to put on our future agenda?
It's Dr. Garcia. Am I okay to speak?
Sorry, can you say that again, Dr. Garcia?
It's Dr. Garcia. I heard another voice. I didn't want to cut someone off. Yeah, for future agenda items, I think it became clear today with a presentation about the budget that we need to look at the statutory and regulatory processes to increase our fees sooner than later. So I think if we can initiate that discussion on our next meeting, that would be great. Thank you.
This is Member Linden. I agree with Dr. Garcia's proposal to put, fee increases or on the next agenda. I would also like to find out more about cultural competency as CEs, if not at the next meeting, then sometime in the near future. I know that we're currently finalizing a CE package now, so I'm not quite sure how that would all fit together, but I'm definitely interested in learning more about having that as a requirement. Thank you.
And any other suggestions for future agenda items?
This is Dr. Ross. I know this has been in the discussion prior to me being on this board, but I would like to look further into this connection between the ARBO OE tracker system and the BREEZE system and initiate some communication, it sounds like, with the DCA IT folks and understand exactly the steps that would be involved to link those systems together. Because I do see offering some sort of combination of licensure with the OE tracker combination as a really exciting opportunity down the road if we can make it happen.
Any other future agenda items? Any public comment?
This is Stacy. I would like at some point, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but in reading in the sunset legislation that there's the talk of the mobile optometric clinics to see if there would be any way to umbrella RDOs into that, because I know that at this point in time there are opticians who are operating on a mobile basis, and when I kind of read things, the way that I interpret it is it's not real clear. So I don't know if there's any way we could kind of umbrella that topic.
Staff can certainly look into the language and work with legal counsel in order to understand what might be our options. The scope of the bill, though, does speak directly to the use of optometrists for examinations, but we can, of course, look into the language and see what might be possible or what might be needed for an additional legislative proposal.
Thank you.
Any other future agenda items? So then we are now going to move on to closed session, and we will adjourn from closed session. So thank you, everybody.
Madam Board President, do we want to take public comment on future agenda items?
I don't think, I did so earlier under future agenda items, or agenda items not on the agenda, so we don't need to take public comment there. So if board members could please still stay on the call or on the Teams meeting, and everyone else will, thank you very much for attending.